Hey, everybody, welcome. Glad you're here with us tonight. We got plenty to talk about. Very big developments in the Uhuru case. A good thing, not ideal, but good. We'll talk about it. This is certainly a victory and a step forward, but it's nuanced. But glad you all are here. I'm looking forward to updating you on the case and telling you everything. So, yeah, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, everybody. Glad you're here with me tonight. We're starting a little bit earlier because I've got an early morning tomorrow. The way we do things on these streams is I give my opening remarks. I talk about whatever it is I'm going to talk about, which tonight is about the Uhuru case and a lot of important developments around that. The fight isn't over yet, but, there's been some victories. And then I do my opening remarks, then we do the roll call, where I find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching, names and locations, always very fun to find out who's there. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions or your Rumble rant questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our program, by all means, send a super chat or a Rumble rant. Quick announcement. Every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have morning messages. We want people in our community to be able to start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. We have morning messages as a way to keep engaged, keep people plugged in, way people in our community can support each other. So we request, we encourage people to start their day with the Center for Political Innovation. We have a morning message every morning from somebody in our community. It's a great way to start things out. The morning message for tomorrow is queued up. It'll be a great way to start your day. Morning message for tomorrow. Here, let me put the link. And it's great way to start your day. And members of our community are doing it. It's a new member of our community who hasn't done one of these before. And she's got one for tomorrow. Not going to give away who it is, but she made one. We do offer this, morning messages as a way of people in our community engaging with each other. One thing that we are encouraging people to do is to make their own morning messages. We need more people to step up and make morning messages. So if you're part of this community, if you're a member of CPI or a friend of CPI, with this special link that I'm dropping, you can make your own morning message. And I'm dropping it in the chats here on Rumble and on YouTube. You can make your own morning message and submit it. So if you want to help other people in the community, if you have an inspiring message, if you just want to read from one of our books or tell a story or whatever you want to do, 1 minute minimum, you can go as long as you want. And if you want to submit a morning message, we now have this great link to submit a morning message. So we ask members of our community to step up and submit morning messages. Tune in every morning on the CPI YouTube channel for a morning message to, hear from a different member of our community, get in touch. We are building a community here. This is not just a social media thing. This is about connecting people with each other. The other thing is there will be some big announcements coming up. It looks like we're going to be having a Korea Solidarity event in New York City in the next couple of weeks. Details about that to be announced shortly. A lot of different things are in the works right now. This election, we got to get through it. There's a lot of crazy things going on. So keep your eyes out. The big thing that we are planning, which is very far away, is next summer. We are having a huge anti-imperialist gathering in Chicago, in the Chicago area, July 12th, 2025. We want to have a huge anti-imperialist mega all-day conference in Chicago. And that's very exciting. And so we are figuring it out, how we can recruit people to it, how we can grow, how we can bring some big name speakers. We are going to have a mega event in Chicago next summer. So if you're a member of CPI, I would figure out travel arrangements now. I would figure out taking off work now. We are going to fill up that auditorium with 400 people minimum next summer. So mark your calendar. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, just a quick reminder, the way we do things. First, I give opening remarks about what it is we're going to talk about. Then from there, we do a roll call. We find out who's watching and names and locations. That's always great. And then after that, I answer your super chat questions. So if there's anything you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, any questions you have, send them in. Now I'm going to get started with the big news. So the verdict in the Uhuru trial came down today. And it's not ideal, but the Uhuru team considers it to be a huge victory. They were acquitted on the charge of acting as foreign agents, and they were found guilty of conspiracy to defraud the United States. Now, it's awful that they were found guilty of anything to begin with. That in and of itself is awful. However, the details here are important. Now, the charge against them by the U.S. federal government was that they had been acting as agents of Russia, and they had been acting as foreign agents, and that their activism in the Black community constituted acting as foreign agents of Russia. They were taking orders from Moscow, and they were lobbying, and they were trying to meddle in the U.S. elections and interfere in the U.S. political process. And they were doing this on behalf of the Russian government. Well, the jury said that's not true. They didn't do that. And I'll tell you more about how the prosecution's case completely fell apart. I mean, they had no legs to stand on. However, there was another charge latched onto it, right? So the idea, it's not illegal to be a foreign agent of Russia. Let me back this up. But you have to register, right? If you are acting as a lobbyist or an unregistered lobbyist of a foreign government, you have to go register. And the judge made this point too. He said, if we find that they are indeed agents of Russia, the crime is not being an agent of Russia. The crime is being an agent of Russia and not registering with the Department of Justice that you are an agent of Russia. Well, the jury looked over all the evidence that they were acting as an agent of Russia and not registering to do so, and they said no. And they were found not guilty. However, there was another charge that went along with it, which was conspiracy to defraud the United States. Now, what is that? Well, the idea is that by not registering as foreign agents of Russia, they were preventing the American government from getting the money it would have received when they registered as foreign agents, and that they had conspired to defraud the United States of the registration fees, and they had acted as foreign agents, and they'd conspired to act as foreign agents and not register. Well, here's the thing, and this is the thing. If they were not acting as foreign agents, they could not have defrauded the United States, because the conspiracy, the activities that they engaged in did not constitute acting as foreign agents. So conspiring to commit those activities does not constitute defrauding the United States in any way. The whole thing is very, very bizarre, and we're going to get into this, in detail. But they were celebrating today because they expect that this conviction will be overturned on appeal, and that the main charge against them, that they acted as agents of Russia, they defeated it. And so the conspiracy charge that was attached to it, which carries a much lesser penalty, that conspiracy charge, they believe, is very easy to defeat in appeals court, and that they have a number of grounds on which they can file appeals. One of them is the jury instructions that was given. There are a number of grounds, but let me just talk about what happened at the trial. At the trial, the FBI was completely exposed, and this is the amazing thing. The prosecution called as witnesses an expert on Russia from Syracuse University. And that expert on Russia testified all kinds of stuff about 1917 and the Bolsheviks and the Cheka and all kinds of stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with the defendants. And when that expert on Russia was cross-examined, he admitted he knew absolutely nothing about the Uhuru case. Nothing about it. He knew nothing about the African People's Socialist Party. He knew nothing about Chairman O'Malley. He knew nothing about Penny Hess. He knew nothing about Jesse Neville. And he was just testifying about Russian history. So he was done. All the other witnesses for the prosecution were FBI agents. And the FBI agents got up there and they had one screenshot. They had a screenshot of a text message exchange, not between any of the defendants and any Russians, but between a Russian guy, Alexander Ionov, and they said an FSB, Russian Security Services agent. Now, this screenshot was from several years after this conspiracy allegedly took place, and there was no proof of any communication, any conspiring between the defendants and Alexander Ionov, or between the defendants and the Federal Securities Bureau of Russia. Furthermore, and this is where it gets very interesting, the FBI agents were forced to admit on the stand that the contents of the indictment, right? The reason, in order to bring charges against somebody, you have to get the grand jury, the federal grand jury, to approve an indictment. What they said they had proof of in order to get the indictment against the defendants was not true. The FBI agents admitted that when they got the indictment against the Uhuru Three, they had claimed they had evidence of all kinds of things that they did not have evidence of. The FBI admitted perjury. It is a crime. If you lie to a grand jury, that's a crime. Right? That's perjury. Multiple FBI agents admitted that their own agency engaged in perjury. And they admitted this on the stand. They admitted that they did not, they read out, the lawyers read out the indictment against the Uhuru Three, and the FBI agents said, nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. And they admitted that what was in the indictment, the whole reason these charges were brought was because of an indictment filed by the FBI. And the FBI agents themselves admitted on the stand that that was not true. The FBI confessed to perjury in open court. Now, I mean, this is huge. And it gets even more interesting. All right, and this is where it gets very, very interesting. So, the prosecution witnesses, except for the professor from Syracuse, all of them were FBI agents. The jury had only one black person on it. And on the last day, that black person didn't show up. And so they were replaced. And it was an all-white jury that gathered and came up with this verdict. finding them not guilty of being foreign agents, but instead guilty of conspiring to defraud the United States, which would have meant they were acting as foreign agents. Doesn't make any sense. So it was an all-white jury. But that jury made multiple requests to the judge for anonymity, for protection. Why? Well, I guess we don't know. But the jury very, very much feared retaliation. And the only black juror didn't show up on the last day of the trial, the day that, that it was supposed to go to deliberations. What happened? Well, we know what happened. I mean, I pretty clearly understand what happened. It's not officially stated. The jury was afraid to go against the FBI. The one black juror was scared that this black juror would rule against the FBI and be retaliated against. The jurors themselves were terrified to go against the FBI. And there were a lot of things that have happened to the Uhuru movement that have nothing to do with this criminal case that are just the FBI targeting them. For example, the FBI has gone around to all the banks that they do transactions with and told them not to let them have bank accounts there. That's the FBI being the FBI. The Uhuru case, they bought property adjacent to their community centers, some churches that were empty. They bought them, and they were going to use them for community projects. And right after they bought them, they all got burned down, right? Someone showed up at their building in St. Petersburg, Florida, with a military-grade flamethrower and lit their red, black, and green flag on fire. They are the target of gangster-like behavior from the FBI. And the jurors were terrified to rule against the FBI. And the one black juror didn't even show up because she was afraid, oh my God, I'm going to have to find these people innocent because it's really clear they didn't do anything wrong. And the FBI is admitting on the stand, yeah, we lied. We just wanted to get them. And I'm going to have to, in good conscience, as a black person, rule that they, that they're innocent, and the FBI is going to go after my family. This is the shit that we used to hear that the KGB did, right? That's what we were always told. I was told, oh, back in the day in the Soviet Union, the athletes, if they would go to the Olympics, and if they didn't do well, their families would be tortured by the KGB. That's what the FBI is doing. They falsely accused 3 people of being foreign agents, and the jurors were so scared to rule against the FBI. One of them didn't show up. She was just, or he or she, I don't know what the gender of the person, I don't know anything about the person except they're the only black juror, right? I wasn't there to see the final jury selection. He, she, I don't know whoever the person was, they didn't even show up on the last day because they didn't want to be involved in the verdict. They didn't want to be involved in, in having anything to do with it. The jurors themselves put in multiple requests to the judge to protect their anonymity because they were afraid of their identities being leaked and afraid they would retain. This is the FBI acting like the Mafia. This is the FBI acting like a gang, right? At that courthouse, I was there on the first day of jury selection. You cannot carry a phone into a courthouse because the Mafia takes pictures of witnesses and uses that to retaliate against them, right? You can't carry it in. It's not that you can't have it out. You cannot carry it in with you because they want to prevent retaliation against witnesses, retaliation against jurors. That's what organized crime is notorious for doing. And so in order to prevent that, you cannot carry a phone into the building in federal court. It is not allowed. Well, I mean, it looks like the gang, the mafia, that they should be worried about is the FBI. Now, I don't know if you all saw, and I don't exactly know the details. I'm here in New York City, Brooklyn, New York. But yesterday, according to the reports that have come out, I do not know the details. I don't even know exactly the name of the person involved, but somebody who works with RT, just like me, in Miami, a woman, had 20 FBI agents show up at her house at 5 in the morning. They came into her house and they roughed her up. They stripped off all her clothes. They had a special search warrant to search her person. They stripped off all her clothes and searched her body cavities. They took all of her electronics, etc. And she then called the Russian consulate and got on a flight back to Russia. And this is according to Sputnik. This is according to multiple reports that have come out. Somebody who was just doing their job, an RT person, was interrogated for 5 hours, beaten up, and had their body cavities searched by 20 agents who stormed into her home with guns at 5 in the morning. 20 people to target one woman. And she's not even charged with the crime. No charges against her. But she was detained and interrogated about, various people. And they searched her body cavities and, took all her clothes off of her, and disgusting behavior. And the FBI, at this point, is a completely lawless organization. And they admitted on the stand that they committed perjury and lied. They had absolutely no evidence to prove that these 3 defendants, the Uhuru 3, were acting as agents of Russia. They did not have any evidence of that. There was not any possible way to show that they had become agents of the Russian government. And they were under the control of the Russian government. They were acting on the Russian government's behalf. And multiple FBI agents admitted and confirmed on the stand that, oh yeah, what we put in the indictment against the Uhuru 3, that wasn't true. They blatantly lied to the courts and admitted it on the stand. I mean, this is the case we're living in. Scott Ritter did a very good summation of the case. That is the fact that, and why would they just admit that they lied on the stand? Because they know they're never going to be prosecuted, because the federal prosecutors and the FBI are good buddies. And so they're never going to be prosecuted. It's just like local cops lie on the stand all the time to help local prosecutors. Why? Because who would have to prosecute them? The local prosecutor. They're not going to do that, right? You can read all about police perjury, what's been said by Alan Dershowitz and other experts on the American legal system. Cops don't believe anything a cop says on the witness stand because they lie like crazy, right? And on the federal level, don't believe anything the FBI says on the witness stand because they lie like crazy. And in this case, they even admitted that they lied and made up this indictment. They didn't have any evidence to back up what they claimed they had. And that's just totally fine because they're the FBI and they just know. And these jurors were terrified. They're like, oh my God, we're going to rule in favor of somebody the FBI is going to get, and they might come get us. We want our anonymity to be protected. And they gave them, okay, we'll say they're not guilty of being Russian agents because they're clearly not. We'll do this conspiracy thing, so then they can't say. I mean, this is gangster-like behavior, right? This is absolutely criminal. We have got to abolish the FBI, right? And Noah, shout out to Noah, a friend of mine. He made the point that a lot of people don't understand. The FBI are not the only federal police in America. All right. There are a number of federal policing agencies. The U.S. Department of Justice has had enforcers at many different levels. There's postal police. There's the U.S. Postal Service police that are federal agents. There's the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco. There are all kinds of federal policing agencies. The FBI is a special wing of the Department of Justice, a special wing of the federal policing agencies that was created for explicitly political reasons. It was formed after the Russian Revolution by a very, very bizarre individual named J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was a congressional librarian who lived with his mother and liked to wear women's clothes and was gay. And he lived with his mother, and he was a congressional librarian, and he was this socially awkward guy who worked in the Library of Congress. And after the bombing, there was a series of bombings in Washington, D.C. in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution. And he started giving lectures to members of Congress about communism. He became an expert on the evils of communism. Communism is blah, blah, blah. And he made a career out of being an expert on the evils of communism. And so Mitchell Palmer, who was the Attorney General under Woodrow Wilson, made J. Edgar Hoover the head of a special division of the Department of Justice set up to fight communists. And it was called, at first, the BOI, Bureau of Investigation. Later, it became the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The way the U.S. executive branch works, right? Just so you know. So in the American government, quick political science 101. So we have three branches of the federal government in the United States. We have the executive branch, that's the presidency and the people under the president. We have the Congress, that's the legislative branch, that's the Senate and the House of Representatives. They pass the laws. And we have the Supreme Court. Right? And so the executive branch is the division that's under the president. The president appoints the heads of various departments, right? So the executive branch that's headed by the president is divided into departments. There is the Department of Education. There's the department. There's the State Department. There's various departments. One of those departments is the Department of Justice, and the head of the Department of Justice is the U.S. Attorney General, who's appointed by the president. Now, the U.S. Attorney General is the head of the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice, departments are divided into bureaus. And the FBI is one bureau. There's also the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco. There's the Bureau of Gambling. There's the Bureau of Environmental Legislation. The departments are divided into bureaus. The FBI is a special bureau of the Department of Justice that was created for the purpose of targeting communists. And that's the whole reason it existed. And one of the reasons that the Department of Justice was created, one of the first things they did was they got Emma Goldman, the anarchist, deported from the United States. As Noah pointed out, got to give credit where credit is due. Hope you're watching, Noah. One of their first operations was to try and bribe, you can't make this up, try and bribe a black boxing champion to lose a boxing match, because they were afraid that if they had a black heavyweight champion of the world, black people would see that they could beat white people in fights, and there would be a black uprising against the American government, right? And they were convinced that psychologically, if black people saw that a black man was the heavyweight champion of the world, they would rise up and overthrow the white man. The FBI is an explicitly political division of the American government. During the 1930s, the FBI had comic books and radio shows that they paid for, where J. Edgar Hoover was the hero, arresting bank robbers and all kinds of activities like that. The FBI, in a lot of ways, it was a cult of personality around, J. Edgar Hoover. They were promoting him, and they had special training camps and this special ideology. They were this special fighting force created to rescue America from communism. The FBI was this explicitly political wing of the American government. And during the 1950s, because of the wave of anti-communism, they launched a program called COINTELPRO. Now, what does COINTELPRO stand for? It stands for Counterintelligence Program. And COINTELPRO first targeted the Communist Party USA, but from there it targeted the Black Liberation Movement. It went after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It went after the peace movement. It went after anybody. They considered left-wing politics of any kind to be an intelligence operation. And so there's the counterintelligence program gave them the right to go after anyone that was, they deemed was against the government or questioning things in the United States, because they were deemed to be intelligence. It was an intelligence agency, right? And one of the explicit purposes of the COINTELPRO program was to, quote, prevent the rise of a black messiah. Right? They said that was the worst thing, was to have a black messiah in America. And they went after Malcolm X, and they went after Martin Luther King Jr., and they killed Fred Hampton, and they any black messiah they would target. At one point, they said that the free breakfast program of the Black Panthers was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. That's what they said. Because they said that, these young black people would get, their breakfast from the Black Panthers, and they would become convinced of their communist ideas. I mean, the FBI is the political police of America. That is what they are. And the way they conducted themselves in this case, they targeted a political organization that has a base of support in the black community in St. Petersburg, Florida, and St. Louis, Missouri. They lied to the grand jury in order to bring the federal charges against them. After it went to trial, they admitted that these charges were false. They went after a Russian journalist who was living in Miami. A Russian, RT employee was living in Miami, raided her home yesterday at 5 a.m., strip searched her, and she flew back to Russia, and she'll probably never return to the United States. I mean, this is the activities of a criminal organization. This is not the activities of responsible law enforcement. This is the activities of criminal organizations. I used to work for Ramsey Clark. That's how I got my start in all of this. The whole reason that I'm on RT, that I've been on Press TV, that I write books and all of that. So when I was in college, I joined the Workers' World Party. And Workers' World Party is a Marxist-Leninist communist group. And the Workers' World Party was working with Ramsey Clark, who was Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson, to run an educational or a nonprofit activist group called the International Action Center, the IAC. And I was, for several years, during the Occupy Wall Street protests, during, the 2014 Euromaidan coup in Ukraine, I acted as the media spokesperson of the International Action Center. And I would appear on Press TV and RT and different TV networks from around the world representing Ramsey Clark. I went over to Ramsey Clark's apartment a number of times. I got to meet his granddaughters. I spent the evening with his granddaughters one time at his birthday celebration. We did a gala for him at Riverside Church in New York City. And I handled press. I was the media spokesperson for Ramsey Clark. Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson, and he fought like crazy against the FBI. Ramsey Clark supported the Black Liberation Movement, or he supported the Civil Rights Movement. He was a big fan of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was a big fan of the Civil Rights Movement. And Ramsey Clark refused to wiretap and approve wiretaps on Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, the founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And he was almost impeached for doing that. And he released a lot of people from federal prison. Ann Coulter, the conservative columnist, she has a whole chapter of one of her books, practically, about how awful Ramsey Clark was, that he was coddling the communist radicals and letting people out of prison and doing all of this. And Richard Nixon said, when I become president, the first thing I will do is fire Ramsey Clark. There is an audio recording on YouTube you can find of Lyndon Johnson and Ramsey Clark talking about J. Edgar Hoover and how he was not listening to them, and how J. Edgar Hoover had his own center of power. He wiretapped various presidents and got dirt on them and blackmail on them, and he was breaking the law left and right, and that the president of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, and the Attorney General, Ramsey Clark, had trouble telling J. Edgar Hoover no. Right? J. Edgar Hoover was a force in and of himself, and he had all kinds of wiretapped recordings of the Kennedys, of various people, and he saw himself as above the law. He wanted absolute power. He hated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He hated the Black Freedom Movement, and he was a very, very power-hungry individual, and he was, he was a self-hating homosexual. I mean, at the same time that he was living with his, the agent who was his boyfriend, who after his mother died, he ended up living for the rest of his life with his boyfriend, who was another FBI agent. And there's all kinds of pictures that floated around of him dressed up in women's clothes. He loved to cross-dress or something. The guy had issues, but at the same time, he was persecuting the gay rights movement. At the same time, the whole thing is just a bizarre case, right? That's not the point. The point is that J. Edgar Hoover, acting on behalf of U.S. imperialism, running his own little kingdom, which was this special bureau of the Department of Justice, that acted basically as the political police of America, that targeted dissidents, targeted Black Panthers, targeted all kinds of people who questioned the government, that did all kinds of really horrible things. That this wing of the government, was not acting simply as a wing of law enforcement. It was acting as the political police. It is the explicitly political division of the American government. And right now, the FBI is in an anti-Russian frenzy because I don't know why. They have decided that it is their job to go after Russia and anyone who is in favor of Russia and anyone who talks to Russia, etc. Yes, please send super chats. Super chats are always appreciated for the second half. But it is now acknowledged that the FBI rigged the 2020 elections. And they didn't rig it by changing any votes. They rigged it by blocking out the Hunter Biden laptop story. Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, had a laptop, and that laptop had all kinds of criminal activities on it. And the FBI, they went around to Facebook and Twitter and to all the news media and told them not to cover it. Don't cover it because this is Russian propaganda. Right? Yeah. October surprise blocked. Biden only won the election in 2020 because the FBI prevented a major news story about Joe Biden and the Biden crime family's corruption from getting into the public sphere. They rigged the elections. I mean, this is now, I mean, they rigged the media and rigged the elections. They arranged for Facebook to suppress any information regarding the Hunter Biden laptop. And they prevented a major news story about one of the candidates from coming out. And I think at this point, I mean, we don't know, but I'm sure at this point, they are probably trying to rig the elections for Kamala Harris. The FBI doesn't like Donald Trump. And it could simply be personal because Donald Trump fired James Comey, right? Donald Trump said to the FBI, I'm the president. I get to pick who's the head of the FBI. Well, the FBI thinks it's above the law. The FBI thinks it's the de facto government. And Donald Trump said, no, James Comey, I don't want him running the FBI. He fired James Comey. And a bunch of FBI agents changed their Facebook images to the image of James Comey and all of this. And this isn't the first time the FBI has acted this way. Leonard Peltier, right, is sitting in federal prison right now. Leonard Peltier is a Native American activist. And what happened was he was a leader of the American Indian movement, and they seized some federal property, and there was a shootout. And in that shootout, it appears very obvious that the FBI killed 2 of their own agents. Friendly fire. They were shooting, and their agents were on the other side, and they killed 2 of their own agents with friendly fire. And they blamed Leonard Peltier and the American Indian Movement, this radical Native American group. They blamed them for their 2 agents being killed. So they charged Leonard Peltier, a Native American activist, with being responsible for killing the agents. And he is now sitting in federal prison for that, even though it looks pretty obvious that he didn't kill those FBI agents. In 2000, when Bill Clinton was preparing to leave office, you look this up, and this tells you what the FBI is. In the year 2000, when Bill Clinton was preparing to leave office, Bill Clinton announced he was considering letting Leonard Peltier out of jail. And you can read about this in the Washington Post and the New York Times. FBI Director Louis Frey assembled 300 FBI agents to march to the White House. And 300 FBI agents marched to the White House to oppose pardoning Leonard Peltier. And then Bill Clinton changed his mind. Now, what is that? What is that? That's the civilian elected government not being in control. That is, in the little red book, Mao Zedong talks about the party must control the gun must not control the party. In America, the gun controls the party. The FBI and the Pentagon are in charge, and the elected officials are just the talking heads, right? Politics is not in command in America. The gun controls the party does not control the gun. That's the country we live in. And that's how you should understand this Uhuru case, based on everything that's happened, based on the fact that the only black juror didn't show up on the last day, based on the fact that the FBI admitted on the stand that they lied, based on the fact that the jury didn't convict them of being foreign agents, but instead gave them a charge that, in order for them to be guilty of, convicted them on this smaller charge of defrauding the United States, which, in order for them to be guilty of that, they would have to be guilty of the other thing. So it doesn't even make any sense. The verdict doesn't even make any sense. The whole thing goes to show you that this is not a matter of justice. This is not a matter of law enforcement. This is a matter of a criminal gang called the FBI that is in an anti-Russia frenzy, targeting a black activist group that does amazing work in the black community, freezing their bank accounts and preventing them from banking, burning church buildings that they had purchased, and then raiding their facility and charging 3 of their leaders on charges that were so flimsy, even though the jury was scared and intimidated, they still wouldn't find them guilty of being foreign agents and gave them this lesser charge. Now, back to the Uhuru case, let's talk about the details. So, this charge, conspiracy to defraud the United States, is such an obscure charge. There is no mandatory minimum sentence for this crime because it is so rarely invoked. It's a bizarre crime. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, right? It's like conspiracy to prevent the American government from getting money it is owed, and not a tax crime, right? But yeah, I mean, it would be like, I'm trying to think of like what conspiracy to defraud the United States might involve in other cases. Like, I don't know, if you were going to buy something, buy a piece of property from the American government, and you paid for it in fake currency. But it's not the crime. It's you talked to your buddies about, you made a plan to pay for it with fake money or something. I mean, it's a bizarre crime. And it's like, there's very few convictions for conspiracy to defraud the United States, right? Because it's not, tax fraud is a different matter. It's not tax fraud. It's you're preventing the American government from getting money it's owed, right? The allegation is basically that they conspired to act as foreign agents and not register. But then they weren't foreign agents and they didn't act as foreign agents. So the whole thing is bizarre, right? They can't be guilty of conspiracy to defraud the United States if they weren't guilty of being Russian agents. So that's why they expect that this verdict will be overturned. And that's why they are celebrating this as a victory, because it is now a court of law has ruled they were not foreign agents. And the FBI admitted on the stand that they lied in order to even bring the criminal charges against them. And, they could not get one single person in the black community in St. Louis or in St. Petersburg to get on the stand and say, oh, well, they don't work for the black people here. They work for the Russians. There was not a single witness from the community to testify against them. Not a single one. You would think it'd be much easier to find a stool pigeon, to find somebody who had some grievance about something that they could get on there and say, oh, yeah, they don't work for the black people here. I know they're on orders from Moscow. They couldn't find a single person to get on the stand and say that. Not a single one. And on top of that, they, at this point, they have been acquitted. They can never be charged with acting as foreign agents again because their actions were not foreign agents. The FBI admitted that they had no control, and the whole thing was bunk. But they were found guilty of conspiracy to defraud the United States. Now, this is where it gets interesting. They plan to appeal the verdict. However, they are going to be sentenced for conspiracy to defraud the United States. And the penalty for conspiracy to defraud the United States could be anything from time served. The judge could just bang his gavel and say time served. They could get probation, or they could go to prison for 5 years, right? And there is no sentencing guidelines, and there is very little precedent. And so at this point, what happens next is that the judge in the case, his staff will conduct a sentencing investigation, and they will investigate, what potential there is for the three defendants to commit more crimes, and do it again. And they will investigate all kinds of matters, and they will determine what the sentence will be. Now, they plan at the sentencing hearing to have a number of people testify that the Uhuru movement are not a threat to the community, that they don't engage in violence, they are in no way a threat to anybody, that they, about the good works that they do. And they will be asking that people who know about the important work that the Uhuru movement does write letters to the judge to make clear that they should not be sentenced, right? And, the matter of guilt or innocence will be decided in appeals court. And that they feel will be, that is a matter that they can work out in appeals court, right? They will appeal, first of all, the jury instructions on, the jurors were not explained, clearly, unless the jurors were intentionally just so afraid of the FBI that they just didn't want to not find them guilty of something, which is very possible. I mean, it looks like the jurors did not understand what conspiracy to defraud the United States means, because you cannot find them not guilty of being Russian agents and then say that because they didn't register, they were conspiring to defraud the United States. It doesn't make sense. They can't be guilty of conspiracy to defraud the United States in this case if they're not guilty of being Russian agents. So the jury clearly didn't understand what the charge meant, and the jury instructions that the judge gave regarding what conspiracy to defraud the United States meant, those jury instructions were improper, and that they feel that on the grounds of just those jury instructions, that conviction can be thrown out, especially because the other conviction, they were acquitted on the other charges. Now, in addition to that, you have to have in the United States a jury of your peers. And in the case of the Uhuru movement, this is a black activist group, right? That's accused of being black nationalists, black separatists, accused of being anti-white. You know, the whole case against them was they were inflaming divisions between blacks and whites because, you know, it was all bullshit. But in such a case, to not have a single black juror, that's not allowed, right? There's many examples of where they have said that if a black person is on trial, especially in a case that is racially inflammatory, can't be an all-white jury. So on that grounds, this verdict could be thrown out. The fact that the only black juror didn't show up on the last day. In addition to that, there were multiple motions to dismiss throughout the trial that were given. Multiple motions to dismiss on the grounds that the prosecution's case only involved First Amendment protected activity. And the judge overruled those motions to dismiss. However, an appeals court will have the opportunity to look over those motions to dismiss and look over previous Supreme Court rulings. And they can say, yeah, everything they were charged with is protected by the First Amendment, so the judge should have dismissed these charges, and they can dismiss it on those grounds. There are a number of other grounds on which this case can be dismissed in appeals court. The main thing is between now and the sentencing hearing, we need to do everything we can to make sure they don't end up in prison. They don't get jail time. I am confident, and the defense team is confident, that they will have their felony conviction overturned. Their felony conviction will be overturned. But we need to make sure that between now and then, because appeals court can take several years, between now and then, they don't go to jail. Right? That the judge doesn't say, all right, I'm going to give him 1 year. I'm going to give him 2 years. No, we have to make sure that the judge in this case does not imprison Jesse Neville, Penny Hess, or Chairman O'Malley. And so those of us, the fight is not over, because even though they were acquitted of the big crime they were charged with, violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, they were not acquitted of this conspiracy charge. And they could still get jail time at their sentencing. So it is our duty to rally as much support for them as possible in the lead up to their sentencing. And make sure that there is widespread effort to make sure that they do not get sent to federal prison. That needs to happen. And then, in due time, the appeals courts will most likely, there are multiple ways in which this conspiracy charge could be thrown out. I mean, the fact that one crime is inherently related to another, and if you rule that what they did is not a crime, then conspiring to do something that's not a crime is not a crime. Maybe if you were, conspiracy to murder and you don't actually murder somebody, that works. But if you rule that what they did was not acting as a foreign agent, you then can't say that conspiring to do it was conspiring to defraud the United States. The whole thing doesn't make sense legally. And they have won, and this is why they are celebrating. They have won because the Foreign Agents Registration Act conviction against them, it didn't stand. And they got the FBI to admit that they lied. And that is huge. The fact that they got the FBI to admit it had falsified the indictment. They got the FBI to admit they didn't have any of the evidence to prove what they claimed they were going to prove at the trial. That's huge. And it also is something we can point to in the future to explain the behavior of the FBI, because of the fact that the FBI, this is what they do. Just like what they did to that RT employee yesterday, just like what they've done for centuries, but what they are doing, right? when they went around to the banks that these people bank with and told them not to have their bank accounts. When they, when they went around, when the churches that they bought, these churches properties they bought for their community projects were lit on fire. I mean, this is what the FBI is doing. The FBI tags somebody as being working with Russia, who they don't like, and then they try to destroy their lives. That is what the FBI does, right? And if they can't charge them with a crime and try to destroy their lives that way, which is what they did in the Uhuru case, well, they go to their banks and tell them, oh, no, you can't bank. Yeah, don't bank with them. Well, I got a little news for you. I used to bank at Chase Bank in New York City. And on the same day, my wife, myself, and every other person who was working with Press TV at that time was told by Chase Bank, you can no longer bank with us. On the exact same day. Every other Press TV person got the exact same letter on the exact same day. And it was right around the time that the Iran nuclear deal was passed. And we all know what happened. That wasn't random. That was FBI. That was, the American government. And, my wife, she's never worked with Press TV. My wife is my wife. She just happens to be married to me. We all got a letter. You are no longer welcome to bank with Chase, right? Well, that's the kind of thing that they do. And this is why, and I'm not trying to make this about me, okay? I'm just trying to explain to you all, because this is what our community needs to understand. And I'm at the point where I don't want to work with people who don't understand this, okay? I really don't. And if you don't get this, and if you choose to ignore this, I don't want to work with you. I don't have to work with everybody. But if you haven't noticed, there has been a vicious personal campaign against me and a vicious smear campaign against the Center for Political Innovation. Okay? Now, if you haven't noticed that, I did an interview this morning on a podcast about my Kamala Harris book. And it's a Trumper guy who interviewed me. And he said, I've noticed that you've been pretty badly canceled. I said, yeah. If you type my name into YouTube, what comes up is pretty nasty shit. If people can't understand that that is the fault of the American government, that is an intentional smear, I don't want to work with you. I'm not trying to win the internet because the internet is rigged by the FBI. Read the Twitter files, okay? And what has been done to me, and what has been done to my wife, who had nothing to do with anything in my life. She's not involved in CPI. She's just my wife. We live together. We love each other. What has been done to the Center for Political Innovation is FBI retaliation against our organization. All right? Look at what they did to the RT reporter yesterday. Look at what they've done to the Uhuru movement because they went to conferences in Russia. And isn't it interesting that this guy who's talked to Putin and been in the same room as Putin a number of times and organizes anti-imperialist rallies and all of that gets all kinds of bullshit about my personal life thrown all over the internet and blown out of proportion. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that even before that, they were smearing me? I was a neo-Nazi. I was, I have been a target, right? And yes, anybody who does this becomes a target. In my case, they couldn't find anything because I don't really do that much in terms of illegal activities. I don't, maybe if I drove, maybe I would speed. I guess everyone does some illegal activities at some point, right? There's a book called 3 Felonies a Day, right? I might jaywalk. That's technically illegal, but I don't really break the law. And so they dug into private, personal aspects of my life and published all kinds of bullshit about me. Right? And you'll notice that people who've done this kind of work, they don't care about it. The Uhuru movement, they don't care about it. They're happy to work with me. They're happy to have me represent them at their press conference and speak before the media alongside Jill Stein. They don't care. People who have done this as long as I have, number one, took the Uhuru case seriously. And number two, realize that, the whispering campaign against me and all of that is bullshit. Okay? That's what they realized. But you'll notice that there are certain people who have done nothing for the Uhuru movement. Nothing. There are certain internet personalities who are supposed to be the top anti-imperialists. They love Putin, and they did nothing. They weren't in front of the courthouse. They have not gone to a single rally for the Uhuru movement. They maybe made one tweet, one symbolic tweet. They have done nothing for the Uhuru movement. Nothing. And you know who I'm talking about. And those very same people that did nothing for the Uhuru movement, nothing, absolutely nothing for the Uhuru movement, have for 2 years straight kept up a campaign of lies about the Center for Political Innovation and about me personally. And they won't stop. I mean, they just continue with these lies. And, you know, they've tried to tell people that we don't allow dual membership in groups. We allow dual membership in groups. They call up people and urge them to quit our organization. And I've even got screenshots of them. You know, they claim that they support the Uhuru movement. Oh, look, they made a tweet. They made a tweet. And I've even got screenshots of their own members saying they don't support the Uhuru movement. And I've got more than that. Right? There are certain people that are basically functioning as controlled opposition at this point. And they have targeted me, and they have done everything they can to divert people away from supporting the Uhuru movement. And they have targeted me, and they've targeted the Center for Political Innovation. And we just need to be honest about this. Right? And again, I'm not trying to make what happened with the Uhuru case about me. That is not what I'm trying to do here. I just want you to understand that in this game that we are playing, which is not really a game, it's a very serious thing, the stakes are pretty high and people get targeted. And if you can't understand that it gets uncomfortable, that they lie, they blow things out of proportion, they prop up fakes who sound like you but don't actually do anything, right? Ask yourself, you know, I mean, if the Uhuru movement running a farmer's market is being a foreign agent, why are certain people that are doing all kinds of things to support Putin and to support Russia, supposedly, why are they not afraid? Why are they not nervous about it? I was certainly nervous about what happened with the Uhuru case because I realized that my free speech was on the line. And that's why I did everything I could to raise the case. I raised it in Russia. I raised it at the UN. We made a film about it. I was going to rallies in New York. I was going to rallies in other places immediately after the raids. We did everything we could to support them. Now, ask yourself why certain people that are all over the internet being, I am the pro-Putin guy. I said nothing about it, did nothing about it, never spoke at one press conference, never went to one rally, never did anything to support the Uhuru movement. But meanwhile, have repeated all the nasty lies and smears they can about me. Ask yourself why this is happening. If you can't see what's going on right now, if you can't see what certain people are doing, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But it's very fucking obvious what's going on right now. It's very fucking obvious. And if you can't see what's going on, I don't want to work with you. Right? I don't have a responsibility to beg people to join my group, to beg people to cooperate with me. If you can't see that certain people that have targeted my wife and targeted me and did nothing, didn't do anything to support the Uhuru movement, despite supposedly, you know, in theory, they should be having the same fears about them. If you can't see that, I don't know what to tell you. Right. And this isn't over. This isn't over. It's not over with the Uhuru movement. We got to make sure that they don't get locked up and that they don't go to prison. We have got to get these convictions overturned, and we are going to get justice with these people who've targeted our community. And it won't come immediately. It'll come when they're least expecting it. And we will expose the FBI operation against the Center for Political Innovation and those who've cooperated with it. We will. And it won't happen immediately, and it won't happen in a way that anybody expects. There's a lot that you all don't know. There is a lot that you all don't know. And there's a lot that can't be said yet. And there's a lot that can't be stated publicly. And there's a lot that we need to wait for before we take appropriate action. But there's a story that really needs to be told. There's a story that really needs to be told about some events that happened a while back. And that story will be told. And people will be confronted. And some stuff is going to happen. But it's not going to happen for a while. It's not going to happen for a while. And for now, we need to celebrate the fact that they were acquitted on the charge of being Russian agents. We can celebrate that. And we need to celebrate the fact that the FBI was forced to admit on the stand that they lied about the indictment. And we need to point to this as evidence of what the FBI does. We need to make clear that our position is for the abolition of the FBI, right? We need to make clear that all the January 6th defendants need to be released. We need to make clear that Leonard Peltier needs to be released. All political prisoners need to be released. We need to make clear that the FBI should not meddle in the elections to make sure that Kamala Harris wins, like they meddled to make sure Joe Biden wins. And we should make clear that it is not appropriate for policing agencies whose stated purpose is to protect our civil liberties and to protect our rights and to protect us as people. It is not their right to regulate freedom of speech and control what people say, to control what countries we associate with or go to and meet with, to control who wins elections. The FBI has no right to decide who wins the election this year. That's up to the American people. It's up to the Electoral College. The FBI has no right to tell us what we can and cannot say and what opinions are acceptable. The FBI has no right to be running Twitter and Facebook and telling us, and nudging political opinions in the way that they want. The FBI has no right to decide what books should be on Amazon.com and what books shouldn't. The FBI has no right to do that. And that we are dealing with a criminal gang at this point. That's what we're dealing with. When they talk about deep state and all of that, this is what we're talking about. We're dealing with a gang that has no problem getting up in court and saying, oh yeah, we lied in the indictment. That has no problem targeting people, smearing people, harassing people. We are up against a criminal entity. And the reason we're up against them is because we love our country. We want a better country. And a better America is America that trades with Russia and trades with China, trades with Iran and Venezuela. A better America is an America that's not part of imperialism. A better America is an America that's part of the emerging new economy, the multipolar world, trading with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation. An America where the banks and the factories and the industries and the centers of economic power are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. We need a government of action that fights for working families. That's what we need in America, a government of action that fights for working families. And that is the ultimate expression of patriotism. A government of action that fights for working families, the defeat of the ultra monopolies and imperialism, and instead a government that organizes the economy to serve the people and not the profits of a wealthy few, that wants the population to rise, wants human growth and innovation and creativity to expand. That's what we're fighting for. We are the ultimate patriots. We are the ultimate anti-imperialists. That's what we're for. And if the FBI was truly carrying out its intended mission, which is to protect the U.S. Constitution, to protect the interests of the country, they should be our biggest fans. They should love what we do, but they don't, because they are not loyal to the United States. They are a criminal gang that is working for ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, that's working for the World Economic Forum, that's working for the Bank of America and for the ultra-monopolistic corporations, for the Pentagon military contractors, for the Silicon Valley tech monopolies, the FBI is not fulfilling its duty under the Constitution to protect the United States. The FBI is functioning as a criminal gang to protect the interests of the ultra monopolies and corporations that are impoverishing the United States. And that's who they're working for. And as the true patriots of this country, as people who do love our country, love our communities, love our families, love our neighborhoods, we have a duty to push back against their efforts to meddle in American politics on behalf of foreign entities, because I maintain that the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank is a foreign agent meddling in our politics in order to serve the interests of big multinational corporations. I maintain that Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Apple are foreign agents meddling in our politics to serve their international interests with their tentacles stretched all across the planet. I maintain that Boeing and General Electric and Raytheon are foreign agents meddling in our politics, trying to expand U.S. wars around the world and send young American men to die and get shot in foreign conflicts. I maintain that the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are dominated by foreign agents who are loyal to a government in Tel Aviv, loyal to a government in Kiev, loyal to a government in London, loyal to a government in Wall Street, and not loyal to the United States of America. I maintain that our country is run by foreign agents and traitors who are loyal to big banks, big monopolistic corporations, and have let our country rot in order to serve their international financial dictatorship. And I charge them not just with being unregistered foreign agents of this international system, I charge them with being agents of a foreign power, agents of a multinational, international financial elite. I charge them with being traitors, with being guilty of treason to this country, for working for imperialism and the monopolistic corporations against the interest of the American people. I charge the ruling class, the financial elite, and the deep state that serves them with treason to this country. And I tell you that we at the Center for Political Innovation are the true patriots. We are the true patriots of this country when we demand a government of action that fights for working families, when we demand an end to the emerging low-wage police state, when we demand full stop, put on the brakes, no more marching toward World War III. We are the ultimate patriots to America. And we have a responsibility as patriots to stand up for the Uhuru 3, to stand up for all the January 6th defendants, to stand up for Leonard Peltier, to stand up for Mumia Abu-Jamal and all political prisoners, and to oppose the FBI, which is acting in complete violation of the U.S. Constitution, trying to force its will onto American politics, meddling in our elections to serve the interests of foreign powers and foreign elites that don't love this country. That is what I maintain. We are the true patriots. We are the true Americans, and our government is run by treasonous foreign agents, agents of Wall Street, agents of London, agents of Tel Aviv, agents of Kiev, agents of Taipei. We have foreign agents, traitorous foreign agents who are loyal to a global financial system, capitalism in its monopolistic stage, imperialism. Our country is run by treasonous foreign agents, and we oppose them because we love our people, we love our country, we love our communities, and we love the best things about the history of this country. We love the struggle against the British Empire. We love the struggle to abolish slavery. We love the struggle to end these wars. We love the labor movement. We love the suffragists. We love Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We love Malcolm X. We love Huey Newton. We love William Z. Foster and Gus Hall. We love Rosa Luxemburg. We love all of the people in the history of this country, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. We love all the people in this country who've struggled for justice, and we keep their tradition alive as we stand up and loudly oppose imperialism and oppose the rule of the ultra-monopolies and demand a government of action that fights for working families. We are the true patriots, and it is motivated by love for our country, love for our communities, and love for our God that we continue our patriotic work. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We are winning, and we have already won. And on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? I don't have any super chats yet to answer. You guys got to ask me some questions. I don't have any super chats. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Zach in Barcelona. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Welcome. Love how you always start roll call with a rising speech. Carter in Minnesota, Scott in Maryland, Denver in Minnesota, Omar in Toronto, Miami, Sprisney in Miami, Patch in Arizona, Ryan in Kansas City, Alex in Brazil, Mariah in North Carolina, Tony in Tasmania, Dana in Indiana. Zach is fired up. Boston, Noah, you were watching. I was quoting you throughout the thing. David, Crow, and Cali. Jenny in Cincinnati. Tony in Tasmania. OKC. Jenny in Cincinnati. Welcome. Names and locations. Cape Coral, Florida. Fired up and ready to go. Barack Obama. Anyway, names and locations. Craig in Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome, Craig. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Tijuana, Mexico. Mundo Cat. Welcome, Mundo Cat. Ottawa. Work in progress. Welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Daniel in Madrid. Welcome, Daniel. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Anybody else? St. David's, Bermuda. Philip High is in the house. Welcome. Daniel in Madrid. Work in progress in Ottawa. Names and locations. Good to have you all with us tonight. I am happy to see the Uhuru movement acquitted of the most serious charge, and I am confident that they will in due time be having the other conviction overturned, but we've got to make sure they don't go to prison in the meantime. Ian Chester in England. St. David's, Bermuda. Good to have you all with us. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. I always think I'm right. So, folks, I do want to apologize because last night I started showing the movie of the Hollywood 10, and I forgot to finish it. Right? I got tired at the end of the stream last night, and I forgot to finish the movie The Hollywood 10. And you all haven't sent me any questions yet. I don't have any Rumble rants or any super chats. And I need super chats, right? Not just because I need something to talk about in the second half of the show. I do need something to talk about in the second half of the show, so it'd be great if you could give me something to talk about, but also because I live in an expensive apartment here in New York City. You don't want to know what my rent is for the 2-bedroom apartment that I have so I can do these streams. So I really do need you all to send me some questions, some super chats. But while I'm waiting for the super chats and questions to be sent in, I am going to put on the second half of the movie, The Hollywood 10, which is what I said I would do last night. So I'm going to put on The Hollywood 10 while I take a quick bathroom break, etc. But please send some super chats because I do need something to talk about for the remainder of our show. I started pretty early tonight, so we got plenty of time to talk, right? I do have an early morning tomorrow, but I got a couple hours left in me. So hit me with your best shot. Ask me anything you want. I am here to answer your questions. I do love you all. I really do. The ability to get on here every night and speak my mind and engage with you all and share insights with you all. The support that you all offer me in the hardships that I've been through and been subjected to because of my efforts against imperialism, the friendship and the kindness and the community that we are building with the Center for Political Innovation is absolutely amazing, and I am deeply grateful for it. You all are utterly amazing. So I'm going to put on the second half of the Hollywood 10 film, the little documentary that was made by the Hollywood 10. From there, then I will come back and answer your super chat questions. So I saw that Carter said he was sending one. I'm looking forward to it. Anybody else? Anything else you want me to talk about? Now is the time to ask. Now is the time. All righty. Just pulling up the Hollywood 10. The Hollywood 10. All righty.
The motion picture companies. He was the organizer of the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, one of the first groups to warn the world against Hitlerism. Always, he devoted his energies to decency and humanity. He is now in a federal prison. Dalton Trumbo, born in Colorado, 44 years old, writer of novels. A writer of pamphlets in the tradition of Zola and Thoreau. Writer of films. Kitty Foyle, a guy named Joe, 30 seconds over Tokyo. War correspondent in the South Pacific. Special consultant at the first United Nations conference in 1945. 5 years later, he said goodbye to his family to go to prison. 10 men. What was their crime? Why are they in prison? There were 2 questions. Listen.
Now, Mr. Trumbo, are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild? Mr. Stribling, the right of American labor to inviolable secret membership lists have been won in this country by a great cost of blood and a great cost in terms of hunger.
Are you now, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Unless it has been changed since yesterday. In our country, we have a secret ballot. And I do not believe this committee has any more right to inquire into my political affiliations than I believe that an election official has the right to go into the voting booth and examine the ballot which has been marked by the voter.
No. Thus, J. Parnell Thomas. He has been put in prison as a common thief. But the 10, do they belong there?
We don't like the idea of going to prison. Our personal lives, our families, our work are as important to us as to anyone else. To explain to a child of 7, 10, or 12 why his father must go to prison, no, it's not easy.
Why didn't we avoid all this? Why didn't we answer the questions yes or no as the committee demanded? Because we wanted to challenge the right of the committee to ask such questions.
Whose words are these? Do you know? No official, high or petty, may prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. Supreme Court Justice Jackson wrote this. This was the law of the land until April 10th, 1950.
On that day, by its refusal to hear our case, the court washed its hands of the rights of the American people. Our rights, your rights. And sitting in silence on the bench was the same Mr. Justice Jackson.
When we appeared before J. Parnell Thomas and his committee, we thought the Constitution guaranteed the rights of everyone. We believed the Supreme Court would certainly stand behind its own decisions. Well, we were mistaken.
The committee is now free to operate, to drag before it 1,000 people, or the million it boasts it has on its list. How are you going to answer the committee's questions?
Answer yes or no. Are you a member of the Communist Party? Of the Progressive Party? Did you ever give $1 to Royalist Spain? Did you ever sign a petition against the Munn-Ferguson bill?
How will you answer?
You can't refuse to answer yes or no. That's contempt. It means a prison sentence for you, just as it does for us.
Suppose you answer yes. How will it look smeared all over the front pages of your hometown newspaper? And what'll happen to your job?
But that's not all. You answer yes, I was at such and such a meeting. Or yes, I'm a member of that organization.
Is that the end? The next question is, who else was there? Who else is a member? We want names, places, people. If you want to keep out of trouble, then become a stool pigeon.
Or suppose you answer no to a question.
Perjury. Sign up for perjury. Perjury? What do you mean, perjury?
I can prove you're a communist. Louis Badenz will testify. Whittaker Chambers will testify. Why, the Department of Justice has 24 professional witnesses who travel around the country proving nothing else.
But those men are liars.
Sure, Whittaker Chambers is a liar. Yet Alger Hiss got 5 years.
Don't you see? These investigations are actually traps. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. It's a form of legal lynching.
And this is the kind of lynching the Supreme Court refused to stop.
We are aware of a developing nightmare of fear in our land, in which increasing numbers of citizens are being forced to swear, I am not this, I am not that, I don't belong to anything, I don't believe in anything, I don't criticize anything.
Loyalty oaths and loyalty boards, and nobody is loyal who criticizes the bipartisan foreign policy. Thought control entering the university campuses, educators being fired, film studios enlisting in the Cold War, labor leaders being framed on perjured testimony, lawyers sent to prison for defending their clients. The reputation, career, and liberty of any citizen at the mercy of the professional stool pigeon.
Yes, government by stool pigeon.
Everybody investigating everybody else. And for this, on April 24th, 1950, President Truman claimed credit.
Boasting in a public speech that his administration had convicted citizens of contempt for refusing to testify before congressional committees.
Not just one court or one committee. Not just the Department of Justice, but the State Department. Not just the Supreme Court, but the President himself. Why? Why?
Could it be that the Cold War is responsible? Is it possible that under the pretext of the Cold War, civil rights are to be taken from the American people?
So that the very people who would have to fight and die in such a war will have no say on whether to go to war or not. There are many problems in our relations with the Soviet Union. But shall people who say no, there must be a way to peace, shall such people be investigated, smeared, blacklisted, sent to prison? When we were asked, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party, the committee was really preparing to ask you, are you now or have you ever been in favor of peace?
Who is loyal to this land? Those who want to settle world problems with the hydrogen bomb?
We feel that the question of peace and war, of devastated cities, of millions of dead Americans, is too important to be left to the generals.
Or in the hands of the Committee on Un-American Activities.
In 1859, Abraham Lincoln said, "The people are the rightful masters of the Congresses and the courts."
We believe this, and for asserting that belief before a congressional committee, 10 of us are going to prison, casualties of the Cold War. How many more will there be?
There need be no more. That depends on you. Truly, it depends on you. Truly, it depends on you.
Wow. So that is a short film made by the Hollywood 10. There were 10 screenwriters who were Communist Party members who were called before the House Un-American Activities Committee, and they refused to answer questions because they weren't going to turn in their comrades and narc out their comrades. And they all went to prison for contempt of Congress. It's funny because I'm watching them talk there, and I thought, my God, so much of that applies to what's going on right now, right? About wanting to avoid a nuclear war, about the danger of war, about, criminal charges that are a trap, and, people. I mean, I'm watching this, I'm like, dang, it's a good thing. I mean, people need to be aware. People have forgotten. People have not learned the lessons. I do remember in 2010, I was out of college in 2010, and the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is a communist group, was raided by the FBI. All their homes were raided by the FBI. And we had a protest in Cleveland against it. The Workers' World Party at that point was friendly with the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And so in Cleveland, we had a little protest against the FBI raids at the Cleveland Justice Center, which is the FBI, where the FBI headquarters in Cleveland are. We had a protest. And all these old folks showed up, all these older people, senior citizens showed up. And I remember thinking, where have all these people been? We have protests all the time. Where are all these people here? Well, these were old communists who knew what it was like. They remembered those old days. And they may not agree with the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, but they remember what it was like when the FBI knocked on people's doors, when people went to jail for refusing to name names and all of that. And they saw that we were having a protest against the FBI for raiding the homes of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. They were out there because they remembered. Well, those folks are all dead now. That was 2010. This is 2024. And a lot of people have very short memories, and we got to bring back the solidarity, and the Uhuru movement, they get it. Do you think they agree with patriotic socialism? Do you think they agree with us waving the American flag everywhere? Of course not. But they saw that we stand with them and they appreciated it. And do you think we agree with their line about various aspects of the working class? Of course not. But we stand with them, and that's the important thing. And people forget that. I've jokingly said that, in 1995, Mumia Abu-Jamal, his execution was stopped because thousands of people went to Philadelphia to stand with Mumia Abu-Jamal. All kinds of people, Roman Catholics, Amish people, Mennonites, communists, anarchists, all kinds of people, vegetarians, went to Philadelphia to stand with Mumia Abu-Jamal. Well, nowadays, all they'd have to do is make a bunch of tweets saying that Mumia Abu-Jamal was transphobic, and half the communists would support executing him, right? There's no solidarity among these blockheads. And when we say out of the movement to the masses, we also mean off of the internet to the masses, right? Internet communism is for blockheads. I just got to be honest with you, because they have no bones of solidarity. None, right? The big communist influencers on the internet, if you mentioned the Uhuru movement, they'd be like, oh, isn't that a cult? Isn't that a cult? And then said that they were okay with imprisoning them, right? And even the ones who claim to be anti-imperialist did nothing for the Uhuru movement and instead smeared those who do. And we've kept notes and we've kept track of these people. So we have to build our own movement. That's why we do the morning messages every morning, right? Every single morning, we do morning messages on the CPI YouTube channel. And it's a way that we as a community can support each other and give each other the positivity that is so badly missing in our times, right? People need positivity. People need optimism. People need a community. And that's what we are here to provide. And so I would really appreciate it if folks could take the time to make a morning message to support other members of our community. That would be a great thing if you could do that. We need you to step up and support the community and make morning messages, right? I do a lot of them, but I don't want to do all of them. We don't want to have it by the same person 2 days in a row. Somebody stepped up, someone who's never made one before, made one for tomorrow, a good one. It's set to air. And I need you to go and make a morning message to support other members of our community, and go and subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel, because every morning we have morning messages on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. If you're a regular here, take the time, record a couple messages, read from one of our books, tell a story, read from another book that you like, read us a poem, sing us a song. Just do something to support other members, because we want people to wake up in the morning with the hope and optimism and love that this community provides. We're not hate communists. We are not Trotskyites. We don't celebrate blood and destruction and vengeance. We are all about building and optimism and growth. We are the kind of communists that Jesus would have been, that Jesus Christ was, when he talked about the last shall be first and the first shall be last, when he talked about, building a world of justice and equality, when he talked about how, it's easier for a rich man it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. When he talked about battling against the rich and powerful, that's what we're about. We are optimistic, constructive socialists. We are struggling for truth and justice. We are patriots. We love our country. We are a different, a different kind of force. So, alrighty. So now, we do have a few super chats that have come in, and we do appreciate them. We have a Rumble rant. We'll start with the Rumble rant, and then I'll answer the super chats. Please keep the super chats rolling in. Yeah, there we go. All right. So we'll start with the Rumble rant. The Rumble rant came from Bonzo Beans, and he said, would a third party reaching 5% of the vote in the U.S. presidential election have any meaningful long-term impact, direct or indirect? That is his Rumble rant question, and that's a fair question. That is a fair question. First of all, I would say, yeah, it would have an impact. It would have an impact. First of all, it would have an impact on the vote. 5% of the vote, that's 1 in 20 votes. That would have an impact. For a third-party candidate to get that much support on the ballot would have an impact on the political conversation. And it would also influence the vote, because that would influence the vote in states, especially in swing states. That would make a very big difference. At the end of the day, my vote under the Electoral College really doesn't matter, because I live in New York and my state's votes are all going to go to Kamala Harris. And if you live in Texas, your vote really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, all your votes in the Electoral College are going to go to Donald Trump. But if you live in Wisconsin, if you live in Ohio, if you live in Pennsylvania, if you live in Minnesota, your vote counts for quite a bit, because those states could go either way and they will determine the outcome. They're what you call swing states. Now, this question actually gives me a great opportunity to talk about something I was going to mention on this stream anyway, which is that I see a surge of support for Jill Stein right now. And I don't agree with Jill Stein on everything, and I don't know if she really particularly likes me. I saw her. I was with her at the press conference. She was the first speaker. I was like the fourth speaker at the press conference on the first day of the Uhuru trial. And I think it's really great, and I agreed with the bulk of what she said when she spoke at the opening of the Uhuru trial. And, I agree with a lot of what she says and does. She was there, and I guess she was clapping a little bit if you watch the video of my speech, and I've met her before, and I'm glad that she's speaking up for the Palestinians. I'm glad she's speaking up for the Uhuru 3. But at the end of the day, even if Jill Stein was awful, I think it's great that she's getting a kind of a social media upsurge. The AOC is lashing out at her. She's fighting back. And the Muslim Americans are now supporting her in big numbers. The Muslim American Association and some other groups have endorsed her. I think that's great. I think it's awesome because no honest person should vote for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is dangerous. Kamala Harris, when she was a prosecutor, she was an evil witch. She was a sociopath, what she did to people's lives. I can show you the video again. And Muslims especially shouldn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's bowing before Israel. Right? I mean, maybe Donald Trump is too, but she's not going to do anything different than Trump is going to do. She's married to an AIPAC activist. Okay? She is an Israeli creation, as Paul LaRudy demonstrated in an interview going over the years and years of work that he's done in the Bay Area around the Palestine issue. And he's seen her rise from local district attorney all the way up to, vice president. And she's been in the pocket of Israel ever since. And her rise on a national level began with an all expenses paid trip to Israel. Kamala Harris is not pro-Palestine in any conceivable way. And if she wanted to make a ceasefire, she would do it because she's running the United States at this point. Joe Biden at this point is out to lunch. So Kamala Harris, no Muslim should vote for her. The fact that Jill Stein is getting support, that's great. I will say this, right? We're told that Muslims are anti-Semites. We're told, oh, they hate Jews. Well, Jill Stein is Jewish. Her name is Jill Stein. And that didn't stop the Muslim American Association from endorsing her. All kinds of Arab Americans are campaigning for Jill Stein. Why? Because they don't hate Jews. Because they just want to stop the genocide in Gaza. And Jill Stein is the biggest major candidate who's actually opposed to what Israel's doing. And yes, she may be of Jewish heritage, but she's standing up for the Palestinians. And so they support her, right? Because it's not about hating Jews. It's about opposing the genocide in Gaza. I think it's great. I think the upsurge of Jill Stein support on social media right now is tremendous. And I will add this, since we're talking about Uhuru. So John sent a super chat the other night about how Jill Stein was called out by the Democrats for supporting the Uhuru 3. And I didn't know in what capacity. I thought he just meant on social media. No, there was an official statement from the Democrat National Committee condemning Jill Stein because she spoke out in support of the Uhuru 3. The Democrats not only support the FBI targeting black revolutionaries, they condemn Jill Stein for opposing it. And the jury found them not guilty of being Russian agents. But the day before the verdict, a couple days before the verdict, the Democrats put out an official statement attacking Jill Stein for standing with the Uhuru movement. That's insane. That's insane. So I think the upsurge of social media activity surrounding Jill Stein is awesome. I think it's great. And I hope it takes votes away from Kamala Harris. I hope Donald Trump wins. I mean, it'd be great if Jill Stein won. She'd be even better than Trump, but I don't think she's going to win. But I mean, I don't think anyone should be afraid of Jill Stein, taking votes away from Kamala Harris, because there is no, this idea that Donald Trump is, why are we supposed to be afraid of Donald Trump? Donald Trump is going to weaponize the Department of Justice against his enemies. Crickets. That's already happening under Kamala Harris. And it didn't happen when Trump was in office. Donald Trump is going to support Israel committing genocide against the Palestinians. Crickets. That's already happening. Donald Trump is a crazy man. He might get us closer to World War III. Crickets. Joe Biden's already doing that. Donald Trump, he's a big supporter of the ultra rich, right? He supported the rich people. He's gonna give tax cuts to the rich. Have you seen U.S. society lately? Yeah, that's already happening. Crickets. I mean, there's just so many examples of, and I just want to mention this. Just throwing this out there. Donald Trump has said over and over again he doesn't support Project 2025. But regardless, this document, Agenda 2025, Project 2025, from the Heritage Foundation, it's supposed to be the reason that you have to vote for Kamala Harris because, oh my God, Agenda 2025 is so bad. Well, Donald Trump says he doesn't support it. But do you know what's in Agenda 2025? Do you know what's in it? Reducing the budget of the FBI and abolishing the Department of Homeland Security. I am not opposed to either of those things. And, I mean, look at Agenda Project 2025, right? It apparently contains a whole thing about cutting the budget of the FBI and dismantling the Department of Homeland Security, right? I mean, based on what the FBI is doing right now, I think that would be a pretty good thing, right? I mean, you read the whole Agenda 2025, I mean, it's all about not having the FBI rig the elections, not having the FBI, go to Facebook and Twitter and tell them who gets to be the real candidate. So, I mean, I'm not in favor of Agenda 2025. There's obviously a lot of things in there I don't agree with. But isn't it interesting that that's what we're all being hysterical about? Oh, my God, there's this plan that'll cut the budget of the FBI, that'll abolish the Department of Homeland Security. Why are we against this again? But I digress. So we have some super chats that have come in. And Carter's super chat, this is the first one. He said, how did growing up in a Democrat house impact beliefs? Carter, I'm going to have trouble answering this because I don't want to violate the privacy of my parents. And I don't want to say anything that would, critique their personalities, etc. Right? And that's where this gets tricky, right? I grew up in a very, very small town in Ohio that was overwhelmingly Republican. And my family were the only Democrats in town. I mean, there were a couple other people that leaned Democrat, like in the 2020 or the 2004 election. There were a couple other families that did vote for Kerry. But, well, I mean, it's a little difficult to answer this without. Honestly, I would argue that some of the ways that I exhibited the no, you're fine, Carter. No need to apologize. I'm just trying to think about how I can answer this in a polite way that doesn't violate anyone's privacy or doesn't criticize the personalities of my family members or anything. But I'll just say that some of the ways in which I bought into the synthetic left mindset, resulted from that, right? There was very much a feeling of all the people around us are blind supporters and we're good. And that's not a good way to be, right? There was kind of an anti-populism that flowed not from the Democrats necessarily, but from being in that situation. From being in that situation where we were the only Democrats in town, we were surrounded by Republicans. There was kind of a righteously persecuted mindset that developed, and that's something I struggle against. I don't want to be anti-populist. When I was a teenager, I was really into Ward Churchill, and I was really into the Maoist third worldist stuff because I had a lot of anger at the very conservative working class people I grew up around because they cheered for the Iraq War, right? And, people would say things, and this is where it gets weird. It's very weird that I'm now I'm not am I a Trump supporter? I wouldn't call myself a Trump supporter because I vehemently disagree with a lot of what Trump says, but I do think he's the lesser of two evils in these elections. But it's kind of weird that I'm in that position because growing up, the Republicans, I couldn't stand them, and I was very alienated from my Republican town. One thing that I remember that I was very, very unhappy about was the Iraq War. I remember having arguments with people where I would say, Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. And they'd say, oh, they're all the same. All Muslims are working together. You know that. They're all the same over there. I'd say, no, they're not. Right. You know, and it was just this very, very, you know, very kind of shallow way of looking at things. My family had hosted a college student in the area. It was from Pakistan. You know, and he was a Muslim. And I remember sharing that with people after 9/11, and people were like, oh my God, you know a Muslim? Oh, you might be a terrorist if you know a Muslim, because again, there was no internet the internet was very new back then, and people had a very sheltered way of doing things, right? I'm trying to remember what else. But you know, and that's why when Donald Trump said to Jeb Bush, let me pull that moment up. You know, this moment, you don't understand how validating this was for me, for Trump to confront Jeb Bush about the Iraq War. You know, it was so validating. You know, it was just this moment from the debate 8 years ago with Trump. I am going to put it on the screen. It was just like, because, you know, this is what Michael Moore was saying. The Democrats weren't even strong enough to say this back then. Okay. The Democrats wouldn't even say that Bush had lied about weapons of mass destruction. Okay. But, you know, Donald Trump said it. And, you know, I remember at one point, you know, the school librarian at my school, you know, yelling at me in front of a bunch of people about how if I needed to keep my opinions to myself because I was disrespecting America by opposing the war, and I should move to another country. And, you know, there was just a lot of like, you are a bad person if you don't support the war in Iraq. If you don't support the war in Iraq, you are a bad, unpatriotic person. You must be supporting the terrorists. You must hate your country. You must hate our troops. There's a lot of that. And to have the Republican candidate talk this way, right? I mean, this was so validating for me to hear this from Donald Trump. And I will put it on the screen because, I mean, I could do my impression of it, but I would get the words wrong probably. And I mean, this was amazing. It was just amazing. It was an amazing moment to watch. I mean, this is like one of Trump's best moments. Like, this alone is an argument for voting for Trump.
On Monday, George W. Bush will campaign in South Carolina for his brother. As you said tonight, and you've often said, the Iraq War and your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it? You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied. Okay. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush.
That was amazing. That was absolutely amazing. And that man went on to be the Republican candidate for president. So all of the Republicans that were telling me I was a bad person, that I needed to move to another country, that I was a traitor and all of that. The leader of their own party now admits that I was right the entire time. That's very satisfying to me. That's very, very satisfying to me. I will say, I do remember that opposing the war in Iraq, right, it opened the door for me studying foreign policy, me getting into anti-imperialism. It opened the door for me to not be a Democrat, right? And that unfortunately, how do I say this without being offensive? Unfortunately, a lot of people that are in small towns, like I did, I'm being very careful how I talk here, they get into the mindset that because everyone around them is a Republican, being a Democrat is somehow this heroic, radical stance. Okay? And it's not. Okay? The Democratic Party, especially now, the Democratic Party is basically the equivalent of being a Republican, right? It was being against Bush meant you were against the wars, meant you were against the suppression of civil liberties. Being against Donald Trump just means you love the Pentagon. It just means you love mainstream America. You love Dick Cheney. Okay? And opposing Trump and opposing Bush are like completely different things. But if you're in a small town and you have this kind of persecuted mindset where, you're surrounded by Republicans and it's very hard to realize to understand that being a Democrat isn't some kind of heroic radical stance. It's not. But it's hard to realize that if you're in a small town surrounded by Republicans. One thing that I remember that happened was, I was always frustrated with the lack of enthusiasm on the part of the Democrats in my area. Right? We were surrounded constantly with evangelical, pro-Bush, pro-conservative messaging. And at the same time, the pushback from the people that were liberal was always so weak and lacking in confidence. And like I remember, one thing that happened, there was a local newspaper in the area. And in the local newspaper, basically in the lead up to every election, the Republicans would buy a big ad and a bunch of people would pay money to the Republicans to sign an ad. I support the Republicans. I support, and I think in the lead up to the 2004 election, the big ad was, we're against gay marriage and abortion, and that's why we stand with President Bush. And a bunch of wealthy, or not wealthy, a bunch of like people in the town paid a little bit of money and put their name in this ad in the local paper. We are Republicans. We support Bush. We're against gay marriage. We're against abortion. And then I remember the Democrats had their ad, right? And it was like there was a college in the area. It was like some of the college professors and some of the doctors and lawyers and other people in the area that were Democrats. But the ad couldn't say, we're against the Republicans, we support the Democrats. The ad, it was called Safeguard Our Democracy. And it had this very odd, liberal, like multiple paragraph ramble. And then it had all these people who'd signed the ad. And I remember reading it and just thinking, like, if I was a Republican, I wouldn't know that this was against the Republicans. It was so weak. And it was always like that. And it was like, and instead of, the Republican ad had said, we support Bush, we're against gay marriage, we're against abortion, support Bush. And the Democrat ad said, safeguard our democracy. And we believe in the Constitution and freedoms. And we are concerned about, and it was the most vaguely worded. I didn't say anything about Bush, didn't say anything about Republican. And that's how the small town Democrats were. They were always half apologizing for everything they believed. They were always rambling, and it was all this kind of like, well, we're smart, and there's two sides to every story, and it was very, 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 I don't know. It was just, there was a class element to it. I have to be honest, right? That especially the most very conservative people in my area tended to be very, very working class. They tended to be evangelical, working class people. The evangelical churches were very, they would take care of people, and evangelical churches and stuff. And those folks, the folks that were the most hard right wing, tended to be the most working class. And the people that were Democrats were few and far between, but they were always doctors, lawyers, librarians, college professors, and there was this class element to it. And it was almost like, well, poor people can get fired up and be full of patriotism and be full of religion, but we're smart enough. We can sit back and go, oh, I don't know about that. I've read multiple books on the issue. I think it's a little more complicated than that. It was this very, very like middle class anti-populism. And I was very fired up against the war in Iraq, and I was very, very, and I was discovering all these politics, and I was just sickened by it seemed like to some degree or other, being a Democrat meant you were against having passion, right? Passion was for the poor people. Passion was for the silly working class people with their emotions and all that. But we're the smart people who go, oh yes, there's two sides to every story. Oh yes. I mean, it was just, I don't know, right? I don't know. I could ramble about this for a while. I'm trying to put this into words and be polite without saying anything. But, and the other thing was that as I was discovering anti-imperialist politics, I couldn't be a Democrat anymore, right? Because the Democrats are imperialists, and I realized that. And Democrats had a politics like the Iraq War was like, they would say things like, well, the Iraq War is like stupid. Like Bush just didn't. No, it's not stupid. It's a crime against humanity. They invaded a country and killed hundreds of thousands of people based on lies. It's not a mistake. That's not George W. being stupid. That's not, oh, he just had to finish what his dad started. That's not, oh, Bush is so stupid when he says things wrong. No, this is a crime against humanity. And then there was a lack of realization. I do remember that when I graduated from high school, there was somebody in my small town, and as they say, bless their heart, I'm saying that kindly. We just don't agree politically, but they didn't understand that. And there was this a liberal family that was very close to my family, and I remember they gave me, out of the goodness of their heart, they gave me for my high school graduation a very meaningful gift, a Save Darfur t-shirt. And I took it and I said, thank you. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be a jerk, but it's like, I don't want the USA to send troops to Sudan. But they didn't understand that, right? Because in their mind, well, he's against the war in Iraq. He must be a Democrat. And I remember that year, the year I graduated from high school, me and my high school buddy, we went to New York City. First time I'd ever been to New York City. And we were at an anti-war rally. And at that anti-war rally, MoveOn.org, the George Soros organization, was there with thousands of paid staffers that were just handing signs to people that said, out of Iraq into Darfur. And that was George Soros trying to co-opt the anti-war movement. We should be invading Africa and invading Sudan, not invading Iraq. And that was George Soros's line for the Iraq War, is out of Iraq into Darfur. Well, I was smart enough to say the solution for Sudan is not the USA invading Sudan. And I had read articles about how Sudan was selling oil to China and was friendly to China, and that Save Darfur was sponsored by Israel. It was an Israeli campaign, and that, to separate South Sudan and balkanize Sudan. And I didn't support that, but that's what all the liberals were pushing. And so these people, well-meaning people, they gave me they knew I must really want this for my graduation. They gave me a Save Darfur t-shirt. And, I said, thank you. And I mean, I didn't ever wear it, but it's like, and it's kind of like, that's the limitation. When you're in a small town and everyone's a Republican, you just assume that being a Democrat is a good thing. And I wasn't a Democrat. I was becoming an anti-imperialist. I am very thankful that I'm very thankful that one, because my parents are boomers, we went to a lot of folk music concerts when I was a kid because my parents just like it. You know, Hootenanny was on TV and they love folk music. And I remember when I was like 5, 6 years old, I saw a folk music concert, and the folk musician performed a number of different songs. You know, folk music concerts, right? It's a guy with a guitar who tells stories and sings songs for 2 hours, right? It's, you know, it's like 2 hours of he tells stories, tells some jokes, and sings some songs to you for 2 hours. And you sit there and the audience sings along. And I went to many folk music concerts with my parents, right? Because they love folk music. It's just boomers liked folk music, right? People my age don't like folk music. I love folk music. And I remember I went to this folk music concert and they sang a Joe Hill song, which I now know, which is Pie in the Sky, right? You know, and it's a Joe Hill folk song, Pie in the Sky, which it's an anti-religious folk song. I might even put it on for you all. I think I've done this before, but I think, I mean, it must be said, but I remember hearing Pie in the Sky, right? It's, you know, the Joe Hill folk song about how, you know, it was him making fun of the Salvation Army. You know, and, you know, it was, you know, you know, long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right. You know, you know, the song actually, the last verse of the song is a call for communist revolution. Here, I'll put it on after I explain it. But the last verse of the song, you know, it's a Joe Hill IWW. It's a communist wobbly song. The last verse of the song is, you know, what is it? Working folks of all countries unite. Side by side, we for freedom shall fight. And when the world and its wealth we have gained, to the bosses we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by, or when you've learned how to cook and how to fry, chop some wood, do you good, and you'll eat, ain't that sweet by and by. Now, you know, the last line is basically saying that after the revolution, we're going to make all the rich people work, and they'll have to work hard after the revolution, and that's what it's saying. I did not have any knowledge, being a 6-year-old, of communism or any of that stuff. So I heard the song, you know, Pie in the Sky, When You Die. I heard it as saying that one should work hard in order to make lots of money, not pray for making lots of money, or not wait until you go to heaven to make lots of money. I thought the song was about the Protestant work ethic, right? You know, because the last line is chop some wood, do you good, right? I didn't get that it was about class struggle. I thought it was about not asking God to make you rich, but rather one should go out and work for a living. That's what I interpreted it as. And I totally didn't get the meaning of it. But that was a communist song. And if you go to a folk music concert, you're going to hear a communist song, right? There's no way. I mean, unless it's like a very conservative, or you know, if you're going to go to a folk music concert, you're going to hear a Woody Guthrie song. You're going to hear a Pete Seeger song. You're going to hear a song written by a communist. And I'm very thankful for that. And it's populist communism. It's working class communism. It's 1930s communism. And I had some conception of genuine communism. When I was a teenager, as I was becoming anti-imperialist, I was becoming a third worldist. I was becoming I was becoming very much of the mindset that, the working class of the Western countries are beneficiaries of imperialism and all that. But I'm very thankful that I at least had a fair share of the Woody Guthrie politics that I'd gotten from the folk music concerts when I was a kid. And I'm also then thankful that I eventually joined the Workers' World Party and met a very old woman who I made a documentary about named Frances Dostal, who had grown up in the Woody Guthrie communist movement. In fact, her one of her friends was the Woody Guthrie family nanny when she grew up in Brooklyn. And she went to Young Pioneer Summer Camp, and she was a working class populist communist. You know, she grew up, her parents had been members of the Communist Party USA during the 1930s. And she had been a founding member of the Workers' World Party in 1959. She was an older lady, a very, very old woman, but she was, she was part of the real communist movement. She'd been in the same room as William Z. Foster and Gus Hall. And she had been through McCarthyism and all of that. And she talked like a real communist, like a populist. You asked her, about democracy. Well, the USA can't be a democracy. USA can't be a democracy if the USA can't be a democracy if you don't get to elect your boss. I remember she said, and she could explain overproduction and people being, and she was like a real communist. And hearing that kind of communism that's for the people, doesn't see the people as the enemy. It's not that kind of middle class alienation. That was good for me because, and I will say the synthetic left, I felt like the synthetic left for a long time, it took me a long time to get over it. It took me a long time to change my perspective because I had that mindset of, working class people are all conservative and they're bootlickers of empire and all that. You got to get over that, right? We need to be in populist mode. But anyway, I could ramble about this all night, Carter. I hope I did a good job of answering it. Hope that my answer here was helpful. That we need to not be elitist. We need to view the masses of the people as the real heroes and the makers of history. And it took me a long time to understand that because, in America, our politics, there's a lot of alienation, etc. All right. George Soros has long campaigned against Russia's sovereignty and Putin. Might his many NGOs be connected to anti-Russia sentiments and prosecutions? You don't say. You don't say. Well, of course they are. Of course they are. Yeah. I mean, no, George Soros is obsessed with opposing Russia and has been. And the Democrat Party, he's one of the main backers of Kamala Harris is George Soros. And the Arab Spring, in this book, I make the whole case about Kamala Harris and who selected her. In my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America. In chapter 3 specifically, I talk about George Soros and his support for Kamala Harris. I talk about the regime change, color revolution apparatus of the United States. Kamala Harris's niece is in India right now organizing protests against Modi, the president of India, that are paid for by George Soros. George Soros is all over Kamala Harris and all over the liberals and all about that. And, George Soros, there was the George Soros prosecutors. And yes, George Soros is at the center of this. And George Soros has been for a long time. So who is George Soros? George Soros is a Hungarian billionaire. And during the 1970s and 80s, he was used by the CIA to funnel money to people that were protesting against the communist governments of the Eastern Bloc, right? He's from Hungary. Hungary was communist, but he didn't like the communists there. And so he funneled money to people in Czechoslovakia, to people in Russia, to people in other places. He funded art galleries. He funded magazines and all kinds of things that were designed to motivate young people in those countries to oppose the communist governments. And he got inside information, probably from the CIA, about currencies, right? So this is a way people make money, is they bet on currencies, right? They buy Deutschmarks, they buy francs, they buy the British pound. And somebody was giving him inside information about what currencies to buy, and he made millions of dollars in currency trading. And at the same time he was doing that, he was funneling money to protest movements to bring down various communist governments. Well, it looks like the CIA was giving him inside information about what would happen in order to help him make money, with the understanding that he would use that money to destabilize communist countries, right? The USA, the CIA, one of their goals was to bring down the communist governments, the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc. And it seems that he was, helping do that. And in exchange for that, they were giving him inside information. We don't know that for sure, but that's what was going on. After the fall of the Soviet Union, George Soros financed Jeffrey Sachs, and he financed Boris Yeltsin, and he financed the economic demolition of Russia that followed the fall of the Soviet Union. And he worked very, very hard to push the former Soviet countries to sell off their entire economies to the highest bidder. Now, as things were very, very bad in the former Soviet Union, many people saw that this billionaire, who is very well invested and connected to American companies, and is very anti-communist, but is very liberal also, is involved in it. And they raised the alarm about it. And communists talked about George Soros for obvious reasons. He's a very anti-communist billionaire, but not just communists, Russian nationalists, Slavic nationalists, others. George Soros is Jewish by ethnicity. And so, you know, in that region, there is a lot of history of, you know, Jews living separately and stuff. And so in that part of the world, people that did not like what happened to, you know, Russia and the surrounding countries after the fall of the Soviet Union, George Soros became kind of the poster child, the image of what was done to them. And then during the presidency of Barack Obama, Glenn Beck started talking about George Soros. He started talking about George Soros, you know, this liberal billionaire who controls it all, in a very confused way, saying that George Soros was a communist, saying that George Soros was a, was a Marxist, all kinds of stuff. I mean, in a very confused way, Glenn Beck started talking about it. And the left, rather than having a conversation about who George Soros really was, because George Soros pays for a lot of Democratic Party stuff, instead of having a conversation about George Soros and who he is, the Democrats just said, well, that's anti-Semitism. Oh, that's anti-Semitism. You're saying that a rich Jew is the one who's responsible for all the evil in the world. You're anti-Semitic. And maybe there were some people in the, conservative camp who were anti-Semitic, but that doesn't answer the question. And I saw communists defend George Soros. And I remember I wanted to pull my hair out. I would see communists say, oh, you can't talk against George Soros. That's right wing. And, there was a whole wing. And this goes with, I'm actually probably going to cut the clip of the whole wokeification thing that Carter asked me about the other day, because the wokeification came at the same time that Soros money was being used to hire people to work. And that George Soros is not a communist. He's an anti-communist. And the NGO culture, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, that stuff came with George Soros money. And George Soros and the Tides Foundation and all of this stuff, right? It was like communist politics just got completely overhauled and replaced with this rainbow flag, group therapy, privilege, white identity, mansplaining, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. This woke thing just kind of overturned communism. And, and it wasn't, every communist group went through this. The Freedom Road Socialist Organization, they got raided by the FBI in 2010. They were a communist group, and they had a national congress, and they spent 3 days arguing about cis privilege and arguing about, do transgendered people who you can't tell they're transgendered have privilege over transgender people that you can tell are transgender? And for 3 days, they had their National Party Congress, and that is what they argued about. They had a debate over, and it's like, this friend, he was in the group at the time, and, they had been raided by the FBI. It's a year after, and they've been raided by the FBI and all this. And he's like, and I remember he got up and he said, the FBI doesn't have to raid us anymore. We've just turned into a lame organization that's not doing anything. He said at the time they were raided by the FBI. They were supporting the Palestinians. They were supporting the Colombian anti-imperialists. And he said, the FBI raided us. And now all we do is we talk about cis privilege. All we do is we talk about, transgender theory. And he said, the FBI didn't have to raid us anymore. We're not doing anything revolutionary anymore. And he was right. Right. And I saw this happen in every communist group. There was no communism left. It was like it just turned into this, and it all came with George Soros money. And the sad thing is a lot of these communist groups thought they were being clever. And that's the saddest thing. It's like, oh, well, we're going to get the George Soros money. We're going to go into the liberal NGO and we're going to secretly take it over with our communist politics. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And that's what Freedom Road is. I mean, Freedom Road Socialist Organization it's a secret club for people who work at liberal NGOs so they can pretend they're still communists. And you have a secret meeting where you hide your cell phone and you got a secret code name and all of this, but you're just a liberal, right? You're just doing whatever the liberals are doing. You're not carrying out the revolution. You're not maneuvering. It's a scam. And you're giving your money to, there's 4 or 5 people at the top that are making money. And I'm sure it's all very, very secret how the money is handled because certain people are living pretty well. And it's all secretive, and it's a way that you can kind of, they've monetized the fantasy that you're actually doing revolutionary anti-imperialist work, right? Because you are working at Jobs with Justice or Planned Parenthood or some liberal thing, but once a week or once a month or whatever, you get to hide your cell phone and go to a mysterious, go to a corner and then, get a location from somebody else. Then you go and meet somebody and you say the password and you sit down and you argue with them about a book that was written 100 years ago, and you debate, whether Pol Pot was genuinely good or whatever. And you have a line struggle about Mao Zedong in 1953. And then you go back to just being a Democrat. And the fantasy is that somehow you are maneuvering from within and the Democrats are secretly serving you. You're the one who's being played. You're the one who's being played. You are pretending to be a communist and LARPing communism while you're being a Democrat. That's what you're doing. And it's like, and people figure this out eventually. And most of the time they get a job at a liberal NGO, right? They get encouraged by Freedom Road to get a job at the liberal NGO, and they play the game for a couple years, and they go to the secret meetings and they hide their cell phones, and after a while they realize that, I've got a career, I've got a job at this liberal NGO that's paying me. And, I've been going to these secret meetings for a while, and they're kind of boring and they're kind of the same. And, I can just get on the internet and argue with people about communism, and they quit Freedom Road and they just become liberal activists for a living. And they get involved in office politics at their liberal NGO group. And I mean, it's a sad, sad scam. It really is. It's really, really sad. And what's sad about it is it's not that people fall for it. It's that there's a lot of people who know better. Who, I stayed in the Workers' World Party for a really long time, even though they had really big problems, because I needed to be part of something. I needed to be part of a group. I needed to have I needed to actually feel like I was changing the world. I wasn't just going to argue with people about it on the internet. I needed to have the relationships with other people. And so I stayed in the group, even though a lot of what we were doing was not helpful. And there's a lot of people in Freedom Road that are doing exactly that. I'm sure there's probably somebody watching this right now who's in Freedom Road or PSL or one of these groups and knows that what their group is doing is bullshit, right? Yeah. But they're staying in the group because they need that community. They need that community. They need that validation, and just arguing with people on the internet, I mean, is not enough. They know they need to be part of something. And so they say, okay, well, PSL has got a fancy website and they have a convention where there's thousands of people. So I guess I'll join this group. And they're like, it's like an abusive relationship. You're getting scammed by Brian Becker. You're getting scammed by Freedom Road. But you're staying in the group because you need to do something. Well, there's something called the Center for Political Innovation that you can join, right? And you're not being scammed in Freedom Road, and you're not being scammed in the Center for Political Innovation, and that's why we're smeared everywhere, right? That's why they go after us so hard. That the Uhuru movement is not scamming people; they're building a real movement, right? And that's why. That's why they've been targeted the way they have, because they're actually doing real anti-imperialist work, going to real anti-imperialist conferences, building real businesses and all of that. And that's why they're being targeted. And the same for CPI. We're nowhere near as big as the Uhuru movement is, but we're a genuine anti-imperialist force. And that's why we've been targeted. And these other groups, PSL, Workers World, Freedom Road, CPUSA, they exist, and they exist to kind of fill that need, right? There used to be a lot more of a need for them but now that the internet's out there and now that social media is out there, there's not as much of a need for them, but they still need to exist. They still need to exist in order to, channel people into thinking they're being revolutionaries, give them a community, give them something to do, and keep them from actually doing real anti-imperialist work. And it's sad. And I mean, I've lived this, and I talk about this a lot on these streams. That's the whole slogan, out of the movement to the masses. That's the whole theme of these streams, is trying to get a real anti-imperialist movement going and trying to get out of the trap of these groups, these scam organizations that are just, because that's what they are. They're just scams, right? And they're not cults, right? I mean, some of them might be a little culty or whatever, but forget the whole cult thing. The ex-cult people are like some of the most awful people, right? I explored that after I'd been in Workers World for a couple years. After I'd been out of Workers World a couple years, I started looking at the ex-cult stuff, and that stuff is evil. That stuff is toxic, okay? The ex-cult people that is some intelligence that's evil. It's playing on people's bitterness. Steve Hassan is an evil person, an intelligence asset if there ever was anything. Advisor to BreadTube, that's a whole nother thing. So don't do the ex-cult thing, right? They're not cults, right? These groups, they're not very controlling at all. They're just a waste of your time. They're a waste of your time, and they're a maneuver to keep you from doing what actually needs to be done, right? I want to build a real anti-imperialist movement. But that's a whole nother conversation. So anyway, next question. Did you expect to get tangible support from your recent Libertarian Convention outreach? It was a great thing to do. We had 1,000 copies of Do You Believe in Growth, and we just blanketed the Libertarian Convention with it. And the Do You Believe in Growth pamphlet was specifically written for libertarians, because libertarians believe in economic growth. And it was very strategic, and a lot of them are anti-war, and a lot of them really like China because they see that there is economic growth going on, right? There's economic growth going on, and a lot of them like it. And so it was an opportunity for me to be like, hey, and talk to them about socialism and anti-imperialism in a way that they could hear it. And as we transition, I mean, we're calling ourselves innovationists now. We're not using the socialist communist label because it means woke to most people. We could show our opposition to wokeism, etc. There you go. So, yeah. So, Andrew Ray, why would you ask me that question, right? Why would you ask me that? You know that organization has gone out of their way to try and target me. You know that CNN advertising for them and promoting them is not a hit piece. And you're trying to create drama by asking. So don't ask. Don't ask, and don't try. I know exactly what you're doing, and it's silly and it's a waste of time. Look, when people have decided they want to be my enemy, it's not my fucking fault, all right? And we have done nothing but bend over backwards to try and be nice to certain people, and it's the same thing, the exact same thing that went on with BreadTube, that went on with Thought Slime, that went on with Bosch, and all of that, right? And it's happened to Peter Coffin for years. Rich kids set up a YouTube channel and use their YouTube social media platform to bully and harass you. And people for whom this is all just internet entertainment decide it's somehow my fault. And they just can't listen when when I point out I've been nothing but kind to these people. I've given them platforms. I've really gone out of my way to accommodate these people, and they have still continued to harass me. And they just, no, it's got to be my fault somehow. No, it's not my fault, right? And, if you're not honest enough to look at the details and come to that conclusion, I don't care. Like, it's not my job to convince you. Look, this isn't entertainment. This is real life. This is what I wish people can understand. This is real life. The Uhuru 3, Chairman O'Malley, right? He was on trial. He could have gotten if he had been convicted of everything, he could have gone to prison for 15 years. He could have died in prison, right? He could possibly still go to prison for 5 years under the conviction that they just got. This is real life. It's not a fucking internet TV show. It's not a fucking internet TV show, okay? And, you know, I've been in Russia and I've met people from Donbass, you know, who've had their whole villages destroyed. I risked my life on a ship to Yemen. It's not a fucking TV show, okay? It's not. This is real life. People's real lives are on the line. And if you can't understand that some social media influencer who talks smack and conveniently wasn't there in Florida to support the Uhuru movement and conveniently wages a personal attack against me, if you can't understand that what I'm doing is real, and that what these assholes do with their shit talking and their memes and their harassment and their relentless efforts to stir up bullshit against me, if you can't understand that that's, one, not my fault, and two, not the same as what I'm doing here, I don't care. It is not my job to convince you. It is not my job to convince you. Internet is not real. The internet is not real, right? And idiots on the internet who talk shit about people's personal lives, who think it's a great opportunity for themselves. I think I know for a fact that there are people in a certain organization that was mentioned here that are disappointed that the Uhuru movement wasn't convicted. They admitted that to me on the phone, right? When I started talking to them about the Uhuru movement, they just started going, oh, they're terrible. They're terrible. And just like they think it's a great thing when shit happens to me, they think it's a great thing when the FBI goes after the Uhuru movement. And not a single one of them were there to support the Uhuru movement in court, right? Because, and I mean, these are not good people, okay? And at any time, they could change their minds and just be nice to us, and they won't. And they won't. And they have made abundantly clear that they won't. And they've gone out of their way to, you know, pressure people to quit CPI, lie to people and say that we ban dual membership, which we do not. You know, it has been relentless. So please just don't, right? If you can't understand that what they've done to me and what they've done to our community and the way that they've basically cooperated with the government against us and the way they left Uhuru out to dry and the fact that they're probably crying now that Uhuru didn't get convicted because, oh, darn, we've got competition. We're the kings of communism. We're the real communists. I mean, these people are despicable human beings. Right? They're despicable human beings. They view attacks on other communist groups as a great opportunity for themselves to be the bosses. I've got screenshots of their tweets where they said that supporting the Uhuru movement was a waste of money and all of that. These are awful people, right? And they want to be my enemies. And I have been nothing but kind to these people. I created platforms for them. I went out there and got canceled for patriotic socialism. And then they did it. I met with Dugan years before they did. I did all of it, and these people can go fuck themselves. Okay? They really can. If they don't want to fight with me, just one kind gesture, just one nice statement. But, you know, for a long time I said just one phone call, just one polite thing. I got a phone call, and on that phone call, I got nothing but hostility. I got nothing but hostility, not just towards me, but towards the Uhuru movement. Okay. They're basically cooperating with the FBI at this point, right? I mean, you know, in repeating the smears against me, spreading personal gossip against me, and leaving the Uhuru movement out to dry, tweeting that supporting the Uhuru movement is a waste of time and all of that. They're basically FBI agents. All right. And if they aren't, then they should stop acting like it. You know what I mean? And that's that. I mean, that's all there is to it, you know? And if you can't understand, you know, if the show that I'm putting on here is fun to watch, just like the show they put on, so it's got to somehow be my fault. This isn't a show. This isn't a TV show. Okay? This isn't a fucking TV show. Let me repeat this. This isn't a fucking TV show. Chairman O'Malley, 82 years old, could have gone to jail for his life. People in Yemen have died. People in Gaza have died. It's not a fucking TV show. And look, there's just too many people that can't get it out of their heads that, oh, I like watching Caleb, but I also like watching this other show. So there has to be a way that they can both be right, or there has to be a way that it's Caleb's fault. If only Caleb would be nice to these people. No, these people, I have tried. I have bent over backwards. I don't need to list everything I've done. I'm speaking about this in a roundabout way where I'm not using names, etc. Right? There's lives on the line. This is a serious operation. I'm really organizing people and trying to build a real base. These people are basically taking everything that I do and using it against me. I'm not opposed to plagiarism, right? You know, I learned from the people who came before me. I learned from Marxism. I learned from William Z. Foster. I learned from the LaRoucheites and the Schiller Institute, and I'm learning from all kinds of people around me, right? Plagiarism is a form of flattery. I try to give credit, but, you know, you don't have to give credit. But when people watch what you do and take what you do and try to use it against you, and when people's really only concern is winning social media, they really aren't building an in real life group. At that point, you have to admit these people are not sincere actors. Okay. And if you think they're great, go listen to them. I mean, I don't need you here. I'm building a real group. The purpose of these live streams is to build a real organization, a real group of people who rely on each other and trust each other. It's not to win the internet. Right? If I was trying to win the internet or anything, I would do that. I have gotten the reason that I've faced the persecution I've faced is because it's a lot riskier to work with people in real life. They learn things about you, you know, they have access to you in ways. I am way more vulnerable because I organize a real group of people, because I get real shit done, etc. These people don't take risks. And the other thing, I see this in the chat, they hate their fans. And I know that for a fact. They hate their audience and they hate their fans, right? They think that anyone, well, anyway, I talk about that. Go watch my video on the normal question. Right? These people, they view their fans as a bunch of stupid nerds. They view their fans as a bunch of weirdos, as a bunch of freaks, right? You know, and, you know, I mean, you know, if you're part of their community, you're being scammed. Right. You know, and I mean, they view anyone who would actually be interested in this. They view them as a weird freak and a nerd. They want to surf on the beach. They want to exercise. Yeah, but the haters tweeted about you, you know, and yeah, right. So, I mean, if you don't get it, like some of us are actually fighting imperialism and some of us are putting on an entertainment show. Some of us really value the community we're building and the relationships. And some of us view the people we're organizing as inferior rabble. Look, this is a hard time. Let me just say this. This is a hard time. It's not easy, right? I'm lucky in a lot of ways. I've had various experiences. Part of why I'm lucky is that I went and learned to sell newspapers on the street. This is a hard time to be alive, right? This is a period I'm thankful every day that social media had not been invented when I was in high school. I can't imagine being a young person now. How do these young people have self-esteem? How do they love themselves? How do they have any notion of what right and wrong is? I mean, it is so hard to be a young person now. Right? I mean, my God, if the pandemic had happened when I was in high school, I don't even want to know what would have happened. I would definitely not be, you know, young people now, my heart goes out to them. And a lot of them are going to have issues. A lot of them are going to have issues. Right? And there's no way around that. Look, we are in a mentally unwell society right now. Why do you think there's school shootings all the time? Why do you think, I mean, go down the line. We are in a really unhealthy society. So the fact that a lot of young people in these really unhealthy times, that a lot of them have their issues, we shouldn't be surprised. And honestly, joining a real mass movement can help them. Joining a real mass movement helped me. Helped me not be shy. It helped me learn to talk to people. It helped me understand the world. And you know, the communist movement saved my life. Okay. In terms of my ability to go out and do things and accomplish things, to relate to other people. Thank God for the communist movement. And, you know, people need this, right? And people need a movement. And, you know, for younger people now, People need something to believe in. They need something to be part of. They need something to give them ideology and direction. They need it. Okay. And the idea that, that we expect young people to just all be cool and hip. And I mean, I don't know. I love everyone in CPI. You know that? I really do. Not that I don't disagree with people in CPI, not that there aren't people who occasionally bug me or say the wrong thing or that I don't make mistakes, but I love everyone in CPI. And part of the reason the group exists is so that we can have those bonds and those connections, so we can grow together, right? And I don't think, and I just got to tell you, these people think their fans are inferior, and they're not interested in these ideas. They're not interested in these ideas, and they think anyone who would be is kind of a weird freak, and they're the normal ones, and they're hip and cool, and they're from rich families, and they think the people who would join their group are a bunch of suckers, and they laugh at them behind their backs, and they, and so fuck them, and if you fall for that, or if you think somehow it's my fault that I've antagonized these people, you are wrong. You're wrong. And I mean, it's not my job. It really isn't my job to convince you, right? If all this is to you is an internet TV show, you're not going to get it. So, I'm not even putting your super chat on the screen, Andrew, and you can clip this and send it back to them, and they can, discuss it internally. I know for a fact they don't support the Uhuru movement. Yeah, I know for a fact that they hate their own fans and their own audiences. I know for a fact that they are, that they are conspiring against our organization. They have done unforgivable things to our group, and they just won't let it stop. They can go fuck themselves. We're better than them, and if they want things to get better, it's on them. They've had every opportunity in the world to not be assholes, and they've chosen to be assholes. So that's not on us, right? It is not our job to try and please them. It is not our job to, my rule that I made a while back, a couple years ago, I made a new rule for myself, which is no chasing after people. No chasing after people. And that applies to all kinds of different situations, right? If you chase after people, you are in a position of weakness, and revolutionaries shouldn't be chasing after people, right? And I'm not chasing after people. I am not chasing after people, right? If you want to work with me, if you want to help us carry out the job that we want to carry out, by all means, come on board and help us. And if you don't, you don't. But I am not going to run after somebody because they happen to agree with me or pretend to agree with me and beg them, oh, please, please let me in your group. Not going to do it. Oh, please, please, let me on your stage. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. I have a job to do. And I'm going to do the job. And if people want to help me do the job, great. And I'll help them, do jobs that they need to do. But I don't have any obligation, none, to chase after people that have made it apparent that they don't want to cooperate. So that's it. It's that simple. Moving on. Next topic. How shocked were you when you moved to New York City? Like when you took the subway, seeing how messed up life is. So I was coming to New York City pretty regularly when I was in college because I was on the national committee of the Workers' World Party. And that even in of itself is a funny story because I was never elected to the national committee. So the Workers' World Party, the way it's set up is that, Sam Marcy was the leader and he was the chairman. He was the leader. But he died in 1998. After he died, they elected a 7-person body to replace him. And it was called the Secretariat. And below the Secretariat was this thing called the National Committee. And the National Committee was like half the party. It was just like basically everybody, like everyone who was active pretty much was on the National Committee. It was like 50, 60 people that they were the National Committee. And then there were a lot of other people that were just kind of in it or came to a protest here and there. But all the people that were really active were on the National Committee. So in Cleveland, there were like 5 members and they all had full-time jobs. And they were all on the national committee, but they all didn't want to go to New York City, right? Because they all had full-time jobs, and, going to New York City, twice a year on a weekend was not something they wanted to do. And I was a college student. I had loads of time. So I remember they would often buy me a bus ticket, and I would get on the bus and I would go to New York City, and I would spend the weekend in New York City at their expense, representing Cleveland on the national committee, which was a great opportunity. And when I came to New York City, I didn't sleep, because this place, at least back then before the pandemic, it still does. It has an energy to it, right? This is a very fast-paced city. It's very boom, boom, boom. So I would basically just not sleep, and I would be up all night talking with comrades. All day I'd be in the national committee meetings. I'd be arguing with people. I'd be getting new books and literature that were only available. And then I'd be back on the bus, and then I'd be, back in class Monday morning. I would just basically not sleep, right? And I would do this twice a year. I would go up to New York City, and New York City was just so boom, boom, boom. It's just got this energy to it, right? Where it's just, there's so much going on, right? And so when I finally moved to New York City, I remember I was overwhelmed. I just got exhausted. It was just so much going on. And I had to learn to say no, right? Because in Cleveland, if there was something political going on, I went to it. If there was a protest, I went to it. If there was an event, I went to it, because there wasn't that many events. And so if you missed something, there might not be something for a whole nother week. But in New York City, there's protests happening every day. There's political events happening every day. And I had to learn that if somebody invited me to something and I was tired and I needed to rest, I needed to say no. Right. And that was a big thing for me. And I remember the first few months I was here, I was just overwhelmed. There was just so much political stuff going on. And it was very difficult for me, and to slow down, to catch my breath. But finally, I adjusted to the pace of New York City. And now, whenever I leave the city, it's like, whew, this place is a little dull. It slows down now. Whenever I leave New York City, things are so slow. Things are like, oh, this place is chill. This is easy. Whenever I go to New York City, things are at like a slower pace. But it took me a good few months to really, really get into the pace of New York City. There's things about New York City that are interesting. For example, right? A lot of Caribbean folks in New York City, right? In Cleveland, a lot of black people, but they're African Americans, right? They're from the South, descendants of African slaves and all of that. But in New York City, there's a very good chance that if you see a black person on the subway, they're from Jamaica, they're from Haiti, and they have a completely different culture, a completely different view of themselves. A lot of them will insist they're not African Americans, they're Caribbean Americans. That was a new thing for me to learn. Another thing about New York City, I remember when I first came to New York City, I was struck, I'm struck by how, when I first came to this city, you see religious people on the subway handing out Bible tracts and stuff. And I was shocked at how fired up they would be, right? And I realized that's because New York City, especially when I first moved here, was like the center of the LGBT movement and stuff, and that religious people kind of felt under siege, right? Because we had religious folks in Cleveland, and there would be gay pride every year, and there'd be people protesting gay pride and stuff. But I was always kind of struck by how angry the religious people that I would see handing out leaflets and stuff in New York City, because they weren't like that in other places. What else about New York City? New York City, it has its own culture. Jewish language, Jewish, what do you call it? Yiddish slang. A lot of people say Yiddish words and they don't realize they're Yiddish. They're just how people talk, right? Just like, there's Southern words. People say ain't, people, there's words, Yiddish and Jewish words are part of the slang people use here. Shmata, which is shmata, which is a cloth, right? Is a shmata. If you're eating something, right? You're noshing, right? If you're snacking, you're noshing. If you're stealing something, but it's like a non-criminal steal. You're just kind of like you're if you're at the restaurant and you eat, you go back to the buffet table and fill your pockets with soft stuff or something. It's kind of like a soft steal. That's schnorring. You're schnorring, right? And there's a lot of these like Yiddish words that people use in their everyday language. You wouldn't know that unless you moved to New York City. People are like, oh, I'm going to go nosh. I'm like, you're going to go what? Right? Or so-and-so is a real mensch. I'm like, he's a real what? Right? I didn't know any of these words because but here in New York City, all kinds of people use them. Chutzpah, yada, yada, schmuck. Gavin gets it. Gavin's, that's just part of the culture in New York City. I didn't grow up with that. Right? That's just part of the culture. What else? Republicans in New York City, that was one thing. They're a little bit different because they're the minority. And so they, since Trump, everything's really changed, but the politics of New York City is a little bit different. What else? One little neat thing about New York City, is that bread, tastes different here because of air pollution, right? They talk about New York City bagels have a unique taste to them. Right. Well, that's because of air pollution, right? It's like if the bread here tastes different because the air here is different, right? If you have a slice of pizza in New York City, the dough tastes different because of air pollution. Bagels, rolls, all bread products have kind of a unique taste to them. They have like a New York flavor, and that flavor is all the pollution in the air. Little known fact, right? And people actually really like that taste. People who grew up here, it's like it tastes like home to them and all of that. And it's actually because of air pollution. So that's an interesting thing about New York City. I'm trying to think if there's any other weird, like living in New York City, things. I can't really think of any. And I do apologize for my little rant in response to the person's question. I should really not get fired up about that. I might edit that out or private this stream. I don't know. I can't private this stream because of Uhuru, but I don't know. Thanks for asking. Now, but I should have done better. I should have just moved on, and I will. I really try to just move on from all this stuff. And thoughts on Frantz Fanon, pros and cons. I will be honest with you. I've never really gotten into Frantz Fanon. I know that he was very important to the Black Panthers, and I have all of his books: Wretched of the Earth, Toward African Revolution, and I just have never really gotten into it. I know it is a psychoanalytical approach about the psychology of colonialism. And it's existentialism, and I understand where it comes from intellectually. It's very much part of that new left phenomenon. It's about but it's specifically about Black people. It's about Africans, and it's about colonialism. So it's a little bit different. I don't think of it in the same way I think of Susan Sontag and some of that other stuff. But I just haven't been able to get into it. I have a lot of those books, and it's not my cup of tea, right? There's something about all of that stuff. When you get in stuff that's pushed very hard by academia, you always have to be suspect of. But then again, there's going to be people who are good, and are genuine organizers who discover that stuff first because it's there. You can buy Frantz Fanon books at Barnes & Noble. And it's there, right? And if you go looking for socialist and communist stuff, you're going to find that stuff. Just like I found Noam Chomsky. That was the first, anti-imperialist stuff I ever read was Noam Chomsky because it was there. So, I don't want to completely write Frantz Fanon off because there are people I respect who like Frantz Fanon. But that said, I find it to be all just not my cup of tea, right? So you have the new left, right, of just kind of, the Frankfurt School, those kind of intellectuals. But then you also have, there's an anti-colonial spin-off of the new left. C.L.R. James, Grace Lee Boggs, Frantz Fanon, Regis Debray. And I don't know. I've never, you know, you see these people speak, and their speaking style is not very populist. They're not, you know, speaking to average people and stirring up the masses. They're talking in weird, esoteric, hyper academic things, trying to prove to everyone how smart they are. They're talking about existentialism and the direction of man, and it's all, you know, it's. I don't put it in the same category as Slavoj Žižek and stuff, but I don't relate to it. I'll be honest with you. With me, you got to give me William Z. Foster. You got to give me Gus Hall. You got to give me, you know, give me R. Palm Dutt from Britain. I really enjoy Reuben Osborne. And Reuben Osborne, I read his 2 books lately. I mean, his book on Freud and Marx, and his book, The Psychology of Reaction. I just read The Psychology of Reaction and really learned a lot from it and got from it. You know, I mean, the book Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt, or really anything by R. Palm Dutt. I like that old school communist stuff. I really do. I do enjoy Lyndon LaRouche's writing, even though it's not, you know, I mean, it is a little bit esoteric. I especially like the older stuff when he was still calling himself a Marxist. I get a lot out of that. You know, I anything by William Z. Foster, I really like that stuff. You know, and, you know, I do get a lot out of, you know, I read memoirs, right? And I actually have a stack of memoirs of old communists. And I actually find that stuff to be very useful. The autobiographies that these people wrote, that stuff is really useful, right? That stuff is useful. I read a lot of left history, right? I've read the 2 big books, Communist Movement, Heavy Radicals, and Revolution in the Air. And I also really enjoyed, you know, Threat of Greatest Magnitude. You know, I mean, I've read the Grover Furr texts. I always enjoyed those. My favorite by Grover Furr is Blood Lies, which is his debunking of Andrew Snyder's Bloodlands. Very, very good stuff. You know, this book is by a writer who's very good. You know, this book is called Human Rights in the Soviet Union. And the author is Albert Szymanski. And Albert Szymanski is an academic who was a Maoist communist who broke with China over the anti-Soviet stance and became like a defender of the Soviet Union from the Maoist perspective. And anything by Albert Szymanski. He has a big textbook on imperialism that is very good, that I really enjoyed. You know, I really enjoyed that. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, you're talking about what communist stuff do I enjoy? I can't get into Frantz Fanon because I just find it to be too esoteric, and it's not speaking clearly. It's not presenting me with facts. It's all about kind of perspective, and it's about existentialism. I know it's very influenced, and that was right. He was writing in France as a black man living in France, and he's talking about the mindset of a colonized person. And I know it. I know a lot of people I really respect have gotten a lot out of Frantz Fanon. But that said, I just have never really gotten into it. It's never really been, you know, what I've gotten into. You know, I mean, it's just not my cup of tea. I'll be honest with you. Yeah. I would recommend people read Stalin. I would, because I feel like Stalin was a brilliant organizer. And if you read Stalin's pamphlet on anarchism, for example, very coherent, very clearly written. I think I've got it up here, right? And he wrote this long before the Russian Revolution. They just needed, here it is. They just needed somebody to explain the difference between the anarchists and the Bolsheviks. And so he wrote this great pamphlet, Anarchism or Socialism by Stalin. And you read it, it's very clear. And it basically lays out the Marxist worldview, at least the Bolshevik interpretation of it, and why the anarchist view is not in line with it, and the differences in very clear writing. I recommend Anarchism or Socialism, by Stalin. And that Stalin was a mass organizer, and so his writing style. I mean, I will tell you that in terms of the books that I really have gotten a lot out of, probably my favorite writer is Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong she was an American, and she was very heavily influenced by Protestant Christianity. and by the abolitionist movement. Her father was a Protestant minister who was an abolitionist, and she was a journalist who became a communist and, lived in China and in the Soviet Union. And her writing about the Soviet Union, about China, and about the United States is utterly amazing. I really, really like Anna Louise Strong. I Change Worlds, the Stalin era. That stuff, it just kind of glows with optimism and hope. Anna Louise Strong, totally recommend Anna Louise Strong. Edgar Snow. Edgar Snow did some very good books about China. He was the first and last person to ever interview Mao, an American from Missouri. A great guy. Edgar Snow, I love that stuff. I've gotten a lot out of it. In terms of economics, the books that I recommend on economics are, I recommend Nelson Peary's The Future is Up to Us. Anything by Nelson Peary is very good. Right? Nelson Peary was an African-American communist leader. He was kicked out of the Communist Party because he was pro-Stalin and because he believed in the Black Belt thesis. He started the Communist Labor Party, and then in the 1990s, his group became the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. I believe they're the group that is behind the Poor People's Army, but maybe they started it. I don't know if they're still involved with it or not, but Nelson Peary, anything that he wrote, The Future is Up to Us, Black Radical, Black Fire, all of that's really good. Nelson Peary's book on economics, The Future is Up to Us, amazing book. Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein, must read if you want to understand the crisis we're in, the crisis of overproduction, etc. High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. There's a lot out there that we could really appreciate. So Gavin says, is I Change Worlds a pompous title, or is it referring to the fact that Strong switched worlds? It is referring to the fact that she went from America to the Soviet Union. That's what it's referring to. And the point of the book, if you read I Change Worlds, the point that she said, she starts the book by describing her heritage as an American and how she's descended from pioneers. And the mindset of the Americans who settled the West. She grew up in Nebraska. Her father was a Christian Protestant minister who was very opposed to slavery. And she describes the mindset of like anti-racist, anti-slavery, fanatically religious pioneers that she grew up around. And then she describes how she got involved with the labor movement and how America, how the Wobblies were heavily oppressed and how the Wobblies were very much an incarnation of that pioneer mindset. That there was kind of a pioneer Wild West optimism and way of being with the Wobblies and the IWW. She talks about the World War I and how awful it was. She talks about the general strike of Seattle in 1919. And then she talks about moving to the Soviet Union and meeting Stalin and being the editor of the Moscow News, which was the English newspaper in Moscow. And she says that the Soviet Union is the new America. The Soviet Union is the new America. And that's her point, is that she went from the West to the East. She left America, and that she found the American mindset of growth and optimism and hard work. She found that in the Soviet Union. That the American spirit that her father had of being a Protestant minister who stood up for justice and going to new lands and growth and optimism, that she saw that in Stalin's Russia with the 5-year economic plans, that the Soviet Union is the new America. That's what she argues in that book. And that she switched from the Soviet Union to the United States. It's a very, very powerful book. I absolutely love Anna Louise Strong. She's an amazing, amazing writer. Just an absolutely amazing writer. So there we go. Yeah, good times. Oh, and I see there's another Rumble rant that's come in. What do you think about getting the American working class to see groups like Answer Allah as anti-imperialist and sharing their interest instead of as our enemies? Well, I wrote a whole book about it, right? And I mean, this whole book is about how the Houthis are our allies against Wall Street and against the imperialists, right? And the Houthis are fighting to free their country and build their country up. And actually tomorrow, the audio book of this book, I read the entire book on here. the audiobook of this is going to debut on this channel. So there's an audiobook of this book. But yeah, that is our job, right? Imperialism is the enemy of all humanity, and it is our job to get Americans to see that our real enemy is at home. Russia is our ally. China is our ally. Venezuela, Iran, the Houthis, the Bolivarians, Nicaragua is our ally against the imperialists. And that it is this imperialist system that is destroying the lives of American working families. It's setting up a low-wage police state. And our job is to build an anti-imperialist bloc. We ultimately need to build an anti-monopoly coalition in this country. And the USA needs to join this new economy centered around the BRICS, centered around Russia and China. It's rising in the world. Instead of trying to destroy it, we should join in it. And we should benefit from it. And we should be part of it. And we should have a multipolar world rather than a unipolar world. Right? That is what I believe. I'm an anti-imperialist. And that this Western imperialist financial system is dying. There's a new world rising beyond the rule of Wall Street in London. And that the future of the American people is with that system, is with that world, and that the people around the world fighting against imperialism are fighting the same people that we're fighting when we demand jobs, healthcare, and education, when we want a better future for our kids, when we want higher wages and a decent life for American working families. We're fighting against the same corporations, the same big bankers, the same imperialist state that they're fighting against. And that's the point that I made in this book, right? That our real enemy is at home, and that the future of the American working class is tied up with the people of the world and their struggle against imperialism. So that's my belief. All right, folks. Well, we had we went over 3 hours tonight, which is great. I'm glad there's been a victory in the Uhuru case. I'm really, really glad to hear there's been a great victory in the Uhuru case. And we need to make sure that they don't do a day of jail time. We need to make sure that those, that those convictions are overturned on appeal. We need to celebrate the fact that they weren't found guilty of being Russian agents. And we need to learn from the Uhuru movement and all that they've accomplished, their optimism. We need to learn from it all. And I am very, very happy that we stood with the Uhuru movement, when they were under attack. I'm proud of all the work we've done to support them, but we've still got work ahead. We've got to finish the job and make sure those convictions are avoided, make sure they don't serve a day in jail. Dare to struggle, dare to win. And we've already won, and we are winning. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.